Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Minato's spirit merged with Naruto part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. A death wrought too soon. 1 hour old, outskirts of Konoha. Minato stumbled slightly as his feet touched the rocky ground of the place of ceiling where he had placed Kushina and Naruto. Even a shinobi such as he could not help the slight fumbling of the steps. He was chakra exhausted, worried, and grief-stricken over what he knew he had to do. Nevertheless, he was not the Yondaime Hokage for no reason. A second later he felt the Kyuubi land behind him, uplifting huge boulders as the bulk of the massive beast sunk into the ground. Minato used the force to propel himself to his wife and son, scooping them up in his arms and landing gently on some untouched ground. "Gotta put up a barrier," the blonde-haired shinobi muttered, shifting Kushina to his left side while making a seal with his right. Instantly streams of light arose from the ground, forming a dome over their heads and blocking out the angry roars of the Kyuubi from the outside world. Minato let out a sigh of relief when the task was done, and set Kushina down on the ground. Naruto instantly started crying. Minato let out a light chuckle, glad that his son seemed like a healthy baby at least. It would make him that much more likely to survive what Minato was about to do. Minato gazed sadly upon his little boy. Naruto was cuddled in his mother's arms, who herself had her eyes closed despite the fact that Minato had moved them and suddenly Minato had a very bad feeling about this. "Kushina? Kushina!" He shook her shoulders roughly, but she gave no response. Naruto started wailing louder. His hand dropped from her shoulder, his blue eyes disbelieving as he searched her face. There was a smile on her pallid demeanor, her lips slightly parted as if giving thanks. There was a billion things he wanted to say to her, about how she was the one who had made him Hokage, about how if she weren't there, he probably would have died a long time ago. About the fact that he felt as if his world was ending, that he was even mad because she had died before him. But there was no point to that, now, because it was just a dead body in front of him, and the unconquerable fiery spirit of Uzumaki Kushina was gone. He choked slightly, in grief, and brushed back a strand of her long flaming hair. Minato simply knelt there for a moment, head down and body shaking, tears streaming from his eyes. Not Kushina, never Kushina. He had seen many a shinobi die in the fields, and as a Hokage he had even sent some of them to their deaths. He had even seen both of his teammates, and one of his precious students die. He had drunk himself to sleep and then some on those nights, but he had always the comforting presence of his favorite redhead. Now though he honestly just wanted to give up and follow her. He wanted to be with her again. But no, Kushina would hate him if he did that. Minato closed his eyes, then opened them again. He took Naruto from Kushina's arms, so limp, so lifeless, and stood. Immediately he started grafting a seal on Naruto's tummy, ignoring the cries and wondering briefly how the Kyuubi still hadn't found them, but grateful for it nonetheless. His plan was to make his son into the new Jinchuriki, and with the power of the Kyuubi at his disposal, Naruto would be able to take Madara. And then Minato hesitated. He was under no illusions that Naruto would be treated poorly by at least some people. Oh yes, Minato did hope that the splendor of Konoha would shine through, but he also knew the nature of humans all too well. And without Kushina there, who could help Naruto learn to control the Kyuubi? The lonely father paused in his seal-making. He had originally planned to put a part of himself inside to act as a failsafe in case anything progressed to a point of seemingly no return. But that plan was only feasible if Kushina would be there the next time to help Naruto get completely control of the Kyuubi. Letting out a breath, Minato quickly changed the seal, and it was just then that the Kyuubi turned to look at them. The red eyes were narrowed in hate, the poison of its chakra lapping against Minato's skin, and there was no time. Minato threw one last fleeting glance at the one who was his everything, and hugged Naruto tighter to his body. "Goodbye, my love." No matter how desperately Minato wanted to follow Kushina, he knew that she would never forgive him if he just let his son suffer alone. Minato was going to seal himself inside of their baby boy too. He would use his body to trade the Shinigami for taking with it half of the Kyuubi's chakra. His spirit would stay with Naruto. He could then release his spirit and see Kushina again when Naruto grew old enough to take care of himself. He could wait that long. The Yondaime Hokage of Konoha slammed his hands together, his fingers going through a vast amount of intricate designs. He ignored the thunderous roars of the Kyuubi and the choking malevolent chakra that flowed from it like a deadly cloak. He instead focused all his attention on the jutsu he was about to complete. He had to focus if he wanted to do it right. Dead Demon Seal. The little old lady who could. 11 months old, Konoha Orphanage. Chosi Kimiko wasn't superstitious by any means, but sometimes when she passed by the blue-eyed, blonde-haired angel, she wondered. Kimiko was a little old lady of 70, and had spent most of her life nursing in the Konoha Orphanage. She had never been a beauty, but she had been gentle and kind enough to snag a few suitors in her prime. However, she'd never taken the young men up on their offers of marriage and a large house all for themselves, because quite frankly, she knew she could never leave the children to themselves. The amount of times the orphanage almost burned down because somebody had left a sweater over the table lamp, or somebody wanted to try cooking when they couldn't even reach the pot, Or even when somebody tried to burn their school project to give it an authentic look but really didn't know how to use matches well. Let's just say that it was more than all the fingers and toes of the nurses present at the orphanage combined. When the younger nurses asked if Kimiko regretted it, she had always laughingly replied no, because what more was there to life than helping the small children that had no one to help them? Besides, she had fallen in love with the place long before any man could have hoped to take her heart. And even now, when by all rights she should have retired and lived a nice quiet life in a home for the old people, she couldn't bring herself to leave the place. And so she stayed on as a nurse, much slower now and no longer able to keep up with the hurling boys but filled with the same love she had when she was 20. The children were very aware of her too, always carrying her books for her or holding open the door when she passed them. She thought it was the sweetest thing. Every now and again her back would ache and her bones would grind to a halt, and she would have to take a day or two off to be in her bed. Those days were painful, but once, a small class from the orphanage had decided to visit her while she were in this state and had sung the dastardliest little song she had ever heard. They had even given her a card. Now whenever she had a bad day, all she would have to do was look at the cut-out piece of construction paper with the sloppy crayon signatures of the children, and she would feel her pain melt away. She cared equally for all the children, but she had to admit that when the bawling, whisker-cheeked, blonde-haired angel was brought in the day after the QB attack, he had found a special place in her heart. And she knew that he needed a special place from her, because he had already gotten enough special places from the others that weren't given the kindest format. 1 hour after the QB attack, it had been jubilation as everyone learned that the threat was over and that they were alive. 2 hours after the QB attack, people started to realize that no, not everybody was in fact alive, including their beloved Yondaime and grief-struck Konoha. 3 hours afterwards, and everybody had somehow found out that the QB was in fact not dead, and was actually in the form of a newborn baby. The Sandaime had done a massive speech and had managed to quell the anger for the moment, and although Kimiko didn't understand most of it, what she did understand was that little Naruto was the only thing keeping the QB from coming back. The very next day, the Sandaime placed little Naruto in the Konoha orphanage, with guards. Kimiko didn't see any of the guards, but she had overheard the Sandaime assuring the orphanage matron that they were there, and Kimiko trusted the Sandaime. Of course, the influx of orphans after the QB attack was enormous, and Kimiko had found even herself asked to work overtime to accommodate all of them. After the first day that he was brought here, she hadn't been able to see their little savior for 3 months. And what a mistake that was. When she finally found a little time out of her schedule to visit their little savior, she was surprised to find that he'd been sectioned off from the other children. Why is he not with the other babies? She'd asked, not very pleased with this arrangement. While it was true that he was their savior, she did not believe that he should be receiving any special treatment. It would only serve to bloat his head. She had raised enough children to see that clearly. The head of the orphanage had simply raised a brow, and then uttered the single worst sentence that Kimiko had ever heard. And she had heard a lot in her lifetime. Do you want the others to be corrupted by him? Kimiko had been flabbergasted. Somehow the patron of the orphanage believed that their little savior was somehow the QB reincarnated, despite the very clear speech the Sandaime had given. Kimiko had pointed this out, but the orphanage head had refused to listen. Keeping that thing is a threat to our safety, the head had said, and I wish you would realize that. The threat's about as relevant as the sea cow, Kimiko had muttered, but had left anyway. She knew she couldn't argue with the one who allowed her in this orphanage in the first place. When Kimiko complained to the others about the patron's unreasonable stance, she'd been surprised to find that she was the one whom they thought was crazy. You're just too kind, Chosi-san, one of the nurses whom Kimiko had thought of like a daughter had said to her, her young blue eyes filled with sympathy. Much too kind. If it weren't so sad for Naruto, it'd have almost been funny. As it was, Kimiko just barely managed to keep in her choked laughter. After that day, she resolved to see their little savior more often. Kimiko was old, and she knew how human nature worked. She knew that she couldn't possibly hope to convince the others that little Naruto was not someone to be wary of. Something like that was beyond her power. What was within her power, however, was the little things that she could do for Naruto. Whenever she had any free time, she would check up on him, holding him despite her frail arms and cooing with him despite her sore throat. Nobody else would do so, after all. The others fed him and they changed his diapers, and Kimiko had to admit that despite their hate and wariness, they did not neglect the baby in any physical way. But they failed to realize that a key component to raising any child was love and attention, something which they were very slow to give. Either that, or they just refused to acknowledge that Naruto was a child like any other. So it was solely up to Kimiko to give their little savior the affection he deserved. And it was in those months that she noticed something very odd about him. She tried her best with him, but even she knew that it was not nearly enough. By all rights he should have been developing much later than the other children, because a baby's development depended mainly on the amount of attention they received, and with the minuscule amount of time Kimiko was actually able to visit little Naruto, he should have been months late in his understanding of the world. He wasn't, however. He was in fact impossibly ahead of the other children in the orphanage. She wondered at this strange phenomenon, and couldn't help the creeping doubt that maybe, just maybe, the others were right about him being the QB reincarnated, but then she shook her head and dismissed the silly thoughts. After all, it wasn't as if he were forming words or anything yet, which in his 8-month-old state would have been a red flag for unusual. He was simply showing the signs of a particularly brilliant child. She had smiled sadly at that thought, wondering if his chances for a bright future would be ruined by what he enclosed. It was at times like this that Kimiko couldn't help but wonder what the yandere was thinking when he decided to ruin a perfectly healthy boy's life. She knew better than the praises everybody sang for their perfect Hokage. Nobody was without flaws, and that was that. Nearly a year after little Naruto had been brought in, the Sandaime made an official visit to the orphanage. Everybody was frantic with decorations and nurses were doing their best to force the boys into acting on their best behavior. Such a task, unfortunately, was deemed as probable on Uchiha dyeing his hair pink. When the Sandaime did arrive, he smiled kindly and spoke gently, complimenting the homemade ribbons and correctly guessing who had made what. He made all the orphan children feel special, and for that Kimiko was grateful. She had to admit, while nobody was perfect, the Hokages came pretty darn close. It wasn't until after all the children had left that Kimiko had learned the reason behind the Sandaime's visit. With a smile, the ruler of Konoha turned to the patron of the Konoha orphanage and inquired after little Naruto. Kimiko, who had passing through the courtyard at the time, paused. She wasn't an eavesdropper by nature, but if the topic of the conversation should concern anybody it would be her, and thus she slipped behind a small pillar to listen. The patron had reported Naruto's status blandly, which made the Sandaime frown a little, but the robed man did not comment. Kimiko also frowned, noting that the patron had skipped over many aspects of the report, such as the fact that Naruto wasn't getting the mental attention that he needed. Finally, the Sandaime sent the patron on her way, and turned to where Kimiko was hiding. "Yes?" the Sandaime asked, a soft smile spreading across his face as his blue eyes searched out her pillar. Kimiko flushed, wondering how he knew she was there but knowing it was useless to ask. He was a ninja after all, and she was just a civilian. She cleared her throat, and walked out from behind her hiding place. Face to face with the ruler of Konoha, she felt her heart skip a beat, but knowing that even the Sandaime wasn't quite as old as her yet gave her confidence. "May we speak privately?" she asked, her voice slightly hesitant. The Sandaime's eyes sharpened, but he nodded in agreement. "I have time," he replied easily. And so, Kimiko began to speak. She quickly explained Naruto's true situation to the Sandaime, whose eyes softened word by word, until he gazed upon her as softly as she had seen him look upon their little savior, in private. "Is that so?" the Sandaime said at the end of her explanation, sounding very, very old. "I've had very many people complaining to me about little Naruto, but I had hoped that the orphanage, where the adults voluntarily look after children well, I suppose it is too much to expect, isn't it? People are grieving, and it is human nature to scapegoat." The next day a law went up that nobody could tell the younger generation about Naruto's Jinchuriki status. "Did you hear that?" she'd said to Naruto as she once again went to visit him after her hours were done. "Now, the other children will treat you normally." Naruto gurgled up happily at her, making her smile back at him gently. She played with him a little while longer, making sure to pet his hair but not touch his cheeks, because doing so made babies drool, before the dinner time bell rang and she knew she had to go. "I'll be back," she promised, turning to leave the small room. It was at the very least painted and lit very brightly, so that their little savior wouldn't grow up in the dark. She left the door open as she left, wanting Naruto to hear the sounds of the orphanage in more of an attempt to get him to learn. Perhaps that was how he was so advanced in the first place. At the end of the hallway, Kimiko couldn't help but give one last, final glance back at him. His interest had already shifted, his little face twisted in an expression of concentration as he reached his arms out to the empty air beside him. She smiled lightly, and turned away again, walking briskly to the mess hall. She could have sworn she heard him say "Dada." But that was just random baby babble, wasn't it? Tittering-tottering. 18 months old, Naruto's room. No, Naruto, that's not food, Minato said worriedly, waving his arms wildly as he watched Naruto chew up the wooden spoon. Naruto was sitting in the center of his own special room, a small metal tray beside him. The caretakers at the orphanage had taken to simply leaving food for Naruto instead of taking the time to feed him as soon as he had learned to eat independently, and only collecting the tray later on. Naruto had finished everything on his plate, but was still hungry it seemed. "Naruto," Minato said yet again from within Naruto's mind, wondering for the 100th time if his baby boy even understood him, "that spoon is not something to eat." "Put it down, Dada," Naruto complained, finally taking that Shinigami-forsaken spoon out of his mouth. It was dripping with saliva, and even Minato had to stand back a little, impressed at the indenture marks that littered the utensil. It was starting to resemble some of the more hard-worn kunai that he had seen during the wars. Naruto pointed one chubby finger at the spoon which he held in his hands. Minato let out a sigh. "No, Naruto, that is not food. Food is something you can swallow, remember? Like that lovely brown lump that we had yesterday." Yes, that was food, but Naruto's attention wasn't even on him anymore. The toddler had plodded over to the right side of the room, no visible wobble in his step as he walked. Naruto's gaze had become riveted on a potted plant sitting on the window ledge, blue eyes wide as if mesmerized. His arm hung limply, the spoon quite forgotten as it dripped off excess drool. And there was quite a lot of excess drool. Minato ran a hand down his face. Sometimes he wondered why he even bothered, though of course, initially he had not bothered. The first of the 3 months he had been inside Naruto, he had done nothing but grieve for Kushina. After the initial getting over of his patheticness, he had started to pay attention to the outside world. He was still waiting until the time that he could be with her, but he knew that mourning aimlessly would not make the time pass faster than doing something productive, such as raising her son. Everything he saw was from Naruto's perspective, but his adult mind was able to comprehend much more than Naruto's developing brain could. He was saddened and dismayed at the treatment Naruto received, but if he were honest with himself, not overly surprised or even mad. He knew human nature well, and had always known in the back of his mind that something like this would happen. The sound of shuffling feet alerted Minato that somebody else had entered Naruto's room, but Minato's sight was Naruto's sight, and it was currently full of potted plant. Naruto didn't notice the intrusion, so he didn't turn around and let Minato see who it was. Of course, Minato already knew who it was even without seeing the person, but still, it would have been nice to turn around and see. Once again Minato thought about tampering with the seal from the inside, but in the end his good sense won out. He wished that he had some more time to develop the seal before he inputted his chakra and forced his spirit inside his son, but the fact was that he did not have that time when the Kyuubi was almost among them. As much as he loved his son, it did get a bit tedious at times listening to baby babble with nothing else to do, and now, with all the time in the world, Minato could not touch the seal for fear of accidentally tampering with the restrictions around the Kyuubi. He had never read or done anything from within a person before, and he did not want to risk it. Naruto's attention finally shifted from the potted plant. He looked around, raising his arms in happiness, as he spotted the one who had entered. It was one of the nurses. Somehow ignoring Naruto's utter, devastating cuteness, the nurse jerked the wooden spoon from Naruto's hands and went over to pick up his tray. Minato frowned a little at the treatment. Despite the fact that something like this happened every day, he was still surprised by it. "You're not a child," the nurse muttered, "stop acting like one." With that as her closing statement, the nurse hurried away, locking the door behind her. Naruto's hands dropped back to his sides, his head dropping. Despite the fact that he couldn't have really understood the words, Minato knew that Naruto picked up on the fact that he was unwanted. Hey, it's alright," Minato soothed, once again wishing that he could pat Naruto's shoulder or pull Kushina's boy into an all-encompassing hug that would just make him forget about all the stupid proceedings around him. But he could not, so all he could use were words. "I'm here, Naruto-chan, I'm still here." Naruto instantly brightened, forgetting his other encounter in the light of the recent one, as babies were wont to do. "Dada?" "Yes," Minato laughed, "it's Dada." "Dada?" Naruto beamed, showing off all of his little teeth. Although Minato couldn't see Naruto, he did manage to catch Naruto's reflection in the window, which was how he knew what Naruto was doing. He chuckled. "You're getting a fine set of molars, Naruto-chan," Minato teased. "Those are the signs of a strong boy." "You are a strong boy, aren't you?" Teething had been a nightmare, especially since nobody had really bothered to help Naruto get through the pain, but Naruto had gotten through the stage somehow. "Dada?" Naruto exclaimed again, not really understanding Minato's words, and then, quite abruptly, Naruto sat down, a serious expression on his face. "Drink? Minato repeated, blinking, wondering how Naruto was suddenly thirsty after all that potato and apple juice. And then, he realized what Naruto was about to do. "Oh Naruto-chan, you have to first find a toy," but his warning came too late. Drink! Naruto giggled happily, slapping yellow puddle that had formed. Stuff splashed everywhere, and for once Minato was glad that he didn't have a physical form. Minato could only smile weakly, not sure what else he could do. "No Naruto, that's not called a drink, although it does look very similar." They weren't in the best of circumstances so far, no, but they were surviving, somehow. Silent vigil. 2 years old, Hokage's office. The Sandaime sat back on his chair, taking a breath as he took a quick break from the monstrous mountain of paperwork that had been threatening to consume his desk. Sarutobi Hiruzen could only shake his head as he thought back to exactly how much paperwork he had received earlier that day. He had been forced to arrange it all in a pattern not unlike the Hatake family hairstyle in order to get it all to fit on the table. Idly he played with his pen, wondering if there was some way to push all of the blasted work onto someone else. Surely his predecessors had found a way to do it. Then again, they were a little bit stuffy, and he wouldn't have put it past the Naruto at least to have actually enjoyed doing this stuff. A small smile flitted across Hiruzen's face at the thought of the Naruto. Now there was a man who certainly knew what he was doing. What he wouldn't give to have the Naruto back again. The past 2 years had been hard on him. Even before the Yondaime was selected, Hiruzen knew he had been losing his touch, but it wasn't really until Minato's death that Hiruzen truly started feeling his age. Previously, he'd been able to ignore it because he had known no other way of life, but when Minato took office, Hiruzen had finally the chance to relax. He finally understood that he was not in top condition any longer, and Minato's efficiency in taking care of the village showed him that he had been in fact failing to keep up with the times. At first it had actually made Hiruzen feel a little offended, because a youngster barely out of school had been so much better at doing everything than he was. It also made no small sting to his pride that his favorite for the Hokage position, Orochimaru, had turned out to be such a debacle. Those subtle feelings lasted until the first 2 weeks of Yandamehood had passed, and Hiruzen had realized that there was no one more suited to the position. Just barely a year after that, the Kyuubi attacked. Hiruzen sighed and put down his pen. That was when all the trouble started, really. While on the surface it was not so much of a change between his pre-Yandame days, there was now and forever would be a marked difference. For one, Hiruzen now knew that his days as Sandaime should be over, but there was no other suitable replacement, and that made things so much worse. For another, the village was different. Normally civilians did not take much notice of what their ninja counterpart did, but even they knew of the loss of their beloved Yandame. He had been widely popular, and in his prime when he died, so nobody really remembered whatever flaws he might have had. It did not help that he went down in a blaze of glory during the battle with the Kyuubi. Hiruzen was old, but he was far from senile. He heard the whispers when his back was turned, and the villagers clearly preferred the young and godlike Minato. Of course, they all had kind thoughts about the Sandaime, but the spark that had been there when Minato had ruled was now gone. There was a kind of morale that had disappeared with the Yandaime's death, and Hiruzen was not sure he could contain the leaks made from that. What's worse, whatever remained of that spark seemed to have reorganized itself into anger. Hiruzen had seen a horrifying metamorphosis of admiration and esteem become rage and hatred towards the very thing the Yandaime sought to protect. He was, of course, thinking about Naruto. A year ago he had put up a law, due to a very kind old woman's intuition. Sadly, that old woman now was confined to her bed, and could not get up any longer. Still, it was her words that helped Hiruzen to see the depths of the village. He could only hope that things would change in the future as heated emotions died down and slowly rage faded into painless memory. Perhaps even now the village had forgotten who Naruto was, and would be willing to accept him again. Hiruzen frowned a little at the thought, noticing something wrong with it. While it was true that he hadn't been keeping tabs on Naruto because he didn't want to show too much favoritism, would Minato be mad that Hiruzen knew so little in regards to his son? Sure, Hiruzen knew that Naruto was developing normally, and that nobody outside was going to plan a high-depth assassination plan anytime soon, but was that enough? Wouldn't Minato have wanted him to know more than that? The Sandaime Hokage shifted guiltily. The truth was he had no time, what with village reconstruction and the budding problem of the Uchihas. But that had been his exact excuse when he was bringing up Asuma, and look how well that turned out. Of course, Asuma was still an invaluable shinobi, but Hiruzen still felt twinges of pain at the fact that relations between them were strained at best, and that they would never be the ideal father and son combo. Hiruzen was not Naruto's father, of course, but Naruto's father was unavailable at the moment. It was true that it would be a little special treatment, since no orphan had a father, but Hiruzen thought that the Yandaime's son might deserve that much. He would go visit Naruto then, and see how the child was growing up. Nodding to himself, Hiruzen stood, fluid in his motion. He went for the door. At the entrance he paused, and looked back bemusedly at his unoccupied desk, wondering how mocking grief about paperwork had turned into an inner soliloquy about the hardships of life. Shaking his head at the intricacies of the human mind, thought his student Tsunade might have known something about that. Hiruzen quietly shut the door behind him and exited his office. He hummed a charming tune as he walked down the streets, nodding to various people as he passed them. Civilian and young ninja alike waved to him enthusiastically, and Hiruzen could not help but smile back. Now there were some people who were not kind simply because they wanted something from him. They were not like the blasted squabbling war veterans who aimed to change Konoha to their will, and would not listen to reason as Hiruzen presented it. This was the village he was trying to protect. The stroll took far less time than he would have liked, and soon Hiruzen was once again in front of the large silver gates of the Konoha orphanage. Well, the gates used to be silver, anyhow. They were full of tarnish now, and it was hard to distinguish them from iron, but Hiruzen had been here when the orphanage had first been built, and he remembered how it had looked them. Shaking such thoughts out of his head, they did make him sound very old, didn't they? Hiruzen quietly entered the compound, making sure not to disturb anyone. He wanted this to be a surprise visit after all. He himself was very surprised to be visiting. There were children playing outside, but he did not allow them to see him. He knew that if he were swamped, he would not have the heart to deny them some of his time. So, Hiruzen stuck to the shadows. It only took him a few moments to find Naruto's room. The Lady Choshi had shown it to him the few times he had come, and although the last visit had been months ago, Hiruzen was not declared to have eidetic memory for nothing. He opened the door to Naruto sitting in the middle of the room with his side facing the entrance, a tower of blocks before him. Naruto seemed so intent on what he was doing that he didn't notice Hiruzen's entrance. The Sandaime bit back a grin. Gently closing the door behind him, Hiruzen knelt beside Naruto, causing the boy's eyes to finally flicker up from the blocks. And then, blue orbs widened in realization, and Naruto let out a happy gurgle, reaching chubby arms up for a hug. "GG," Hiruzen chuckled, and obliged the boy. When he pulled back, he patted the boy's head and took a moment to access the small tower that the boy had made. It was surprisingly intricate, much better than anything Hiruzen remembered Asuma building. Then again, Asuma had never been a particularly active boy on that part, me bilth. Naruto said proudly, seeming to have guessed some of the Hokage's intentions and jumping right into answering the unspoken question. The blonde was pointing one stubby thumb towards his chest, his other fingers curled into a fist. His chest was puffed up, and he might have almost looked manly if it weren't for the fact that he was so undeniably cute. The Sandame's eyes crinkled. Yes. So you are. Maybe you'll even become a great architect one day, and build a monument that people from all the elemental countries will go to and praise. For just the fewest of moments, Naruto's little face scrunched up in confusion, but just as the Sandame was about to open his mouth to explain what he meant, suddenly, the blonde-haired boy's face cleared. Yeah, me Bilther. The 2-year-old exclaimed excitedly, jumping up and consequently, knocking over his tower. His face plummeted. Ah shucks. Hiruzen had to just barely bite back a laugh. Life was never dull with Naruto around. He wondered where Naruto had learned some of the gestures and phrases, and Choshi-san had made it clear that he didn't really have much interaction with others, but Hiruzen did have to admit that it made for some entertainment. Despite himself, Hiruzen felt pride for the little ball of energy. Naruto was a bright child, just like his father. It really was a shame that the village could not see that yet. They're the ones missing out, Hiruzen muttered softly, which caused Naruto to throw a confused glance in his direction. Hiruzen shook his head, and decided to change the subject. So Naruto, I noticed that the blocks are a new addition to this place. Naruto's confusion instantly cleared, as was wont of a toddler. He nodded enthusiastically, obviously happy to share his story, and pointed to the blocks imperiously. Miko gift. Hiruzen made an of understanding. Slowly but surely, Naruto's room had been filling with things from Choshi Kimiko-san. It really was unfortunate that Choshi-san had taken ill now, and could no longer provide for him. The Hokage of Konoha smiled a little sadly at that thought, and reached out a hand to smooth the edges of Naruto's hair. The little child leaned into the touch, savoring it, which only made Hiruzen feel sadder. Would you like some more toys, Naruto-chan? He felt as if he were pawing off time for money, which really shouldn't have been described as a feeling, because that was exactly what he was doing. However, he was Hokage, and he couldn't spare time to take care of Naruto, no matter how much he wanted to. After all, he hadn't even been able to look after his own son and daughter. Besides, if he spent a disproportionate amount of time with Naruto, people might start to wonder. The villagers would probably figure that it was because Naruto was the Jinchuriki of Konoha, but the other villages didn't know that, and Hiruzen was afraid that they would assume the worst. Although Naruto could as of now reasonably pass as the child of any blonde, blue-haired parent in Fire Country, Hiruzen knew it was only a matter of time before people started seeing the resemblances and wondering. It was best to keep Naruto under the radar until people started forgetting about their Yandame Hokage, no matter how much it tugged at Hiruzen's heartstrings to let it be so. Still, if people recognized Naruto as the son of the Yellow Flash, there would be trouble. Hiruzen did not have confidence to capture every assassin that would be sent due to Naruto's paternity. Jinchuriki were usually left alone as a national affair, but if the other villages knew that the strongest of the demons were combined with the blood of the fourth, even Hiruzen could not predict the outcome. Want swords? Naruto suddenly said, snapping Hiruzen out of his thoughts. Hiruzen blinked, not entirely sure what had just been requested of him. Naruto pulled away, hopping around and going through some rather impressive fencing motions. Or rather, they would have been impressive if he didn't look like he was about to trip at any moment. Swords. Fight dragons. Rescue princess. Hiruzen let out a laugh as Naruto's intentions finally became clear to him. You want to rescue a princess? Why am I not surprised? It's what fights do. Naruto sounded indignant. And how would you know that? Hiruzen asked in amusement. The booth Seth. Naruto cried out, looking frustrated as he waved his imaginary sword in what might have been meant to come off as a threatening gesture. As it was, Hiruzen just knew his daughter would have wanted to take pictures. Dada told me. The Sandame had just been about to open his mouth to tell Naruto that he shouldn't believe everything he read in books, when he felt the first warning bells go off in his head. Dada? He repeated, alarmed. All his previous jubilation disappeared in the face of the new threat. Naruto opened his mouth, and then closed it. His face screwed up, and Hiruzen felt his heart do a flip-flop. He recognized that expression. It was one that people had when they were holding an inward conversation with themselves or someone who was in their head. The Hokage felt his gut clench. If the Kyuubi had gotten access to Naruto already, then the villagers would be right, and Hiruzen might not be able to do anything to save the little boy. No data? Naruto asked, sounding confused, before brightening and bobbing his head up and down in fierce agreement with himself. He made a stance, and then crossed his arms in front of him in a big X. No data. And then, he giggled, ruining the effect. Hiruzen could practically hear his heartbeat in his chest now. Someone was obviously instructing Naruto to lie. Could I look at your stomach, Naruto-chan? Hiruzen asked gently, sure that the Kyuubi would tell Naruto to refuse. If it came to that, then Hiruzen would have no qualms about knocking the child out. If there was one good thing about his level of skill, it was that Naruto wouldn't even feel a thing. Doctor! Naruto exclaimed in an ear-splitting yell, hurrying to lift his shirt. He still didn't have complete control of his motor skills, it seemed, however, because quite suddenly, Naruto went tumbling backwards, his own movement causing him to lose balance. The Sandaime caught him before his head hit the ground, and noted dryly that somehow Naruto had gotten the shirt wrapped around his head, exposing his stomach but at the same time, completely covering his face. He gently tugged the shirt off Naruto's head, noting that Naruto was still giggling rather adamantly. There was no doubt that the little blonde thought this was all great fun. Hiruzen pressed a finger to Naruto's stomach, and pushed some of his chakra across the skin. Naruto started squirming in his grip, letting out a sporadic giggle. Hiruzen knew it must have tickled, but he urged the boy to go along with it for a few moments later. Finally, the seal appeared, spreading out like spillway ink from the center of Naruto's belly. The Sandaime's eyebrows furrowed as he examined the seal. No matter how he looked at it, he could find no mistake. It was doing exactly as it was supposed to, and it was not coming loose in any way. And then, he spotted it. Hiruzen sucked in a breath as his mind brought forth the type of sealing that the array most resembled, and quite suddenly, he saw what Minato must have done. It was slightly dangerous, but there could be benefits to it as well, and besides, the seal was some revised version that probably did more than Hiruzen knew that it did. After all, it was Minato that was the seal's genius, and although Hiruzen was a master himself, he acknowledged that the Yondaime had gone beyond mastering the art. It seemed as if Minato had given something of himself and Kushina to little Naruto. It looked like nothing serious, probably just a few memories or something, but enough for Naruto to know that he was loved. It was probably too confusing for poor little Naruto right now, which was why he thought that he had talked to Dada, when in reality all he was seeing was memories, but Hiruzen knew it was also probably the only thing that was keeping Naruto going right now. If there was something that Hiruzen could do to change the people's opinions, he would do it within a heartbeat, but unfortunately his power did not extend to the depths of people's thoughts. "That's that, Naruto," Hiruzen said softly, letting go of the wriggling blonde. Naruto instantly jumped away, running after something on the other side of the room. It seemed that during Hiruzen's examination, Naruto's attention had been diverted yet again, and even a visitor's prescience couldn't keep that bundle of energy still. Hiruzen smiled as he brushed off his robes and stood. He knew he had overextended his stay here, and that he needed to go back to his office. He wasn't worried this time, however. Naruto, he felt, would do just fine. Escape from prison. And 2 months, Naruto's room. Naruto was staring at the door. Minato was getting increasingly worried. Despite dwelling in his son's head, Minato very rarely knew what Naruto was thinking of in any one instance. Yes, sometimes he could follow his son's thought process, but the truth of the matter was, there just wasn't much thought process to a 2-year-old. Naruto was not a silent, or still baby by any means, always preferring to badger Minato for a story or to play with his toys. That wasn't to say that Naruto couldn't be still, but when that happened, it was usually related to a brilliant idea that Minato would definitely have stopped if he had a physical body. As it was, he had been forced to watch Naruto almost kill himself at least 12 times, despite the fact that he was nearly always in a room that he should have known inside out by now. Some time ago, Naruto had been quite willing to listen to anything that Minato said, but Minato must have said the word no one too many times, because Naruto had taken to that idea like a fish in water, no pun intended for his name. Now, Naruto couldn't seem to get enough of shouting the word no at the top of his lungs, and then promptly diving off into another dangerous stunt. And the worst part of it was, Minato had no physical body to do anything about it. And that brought Minato back to the present, worrying over what new idea his son had come up with, and what it would do to him. And then, Naruto nodded to himself, and took a step towards the door. Minato felt his heart flutter at the sudden movement. What was Naruto going to do? Was he going to attempt to set the room on fire again in an effort to become a dragon, or destroy the window trying to throw his blocks like kunai, or, oh Kami no, try planking again? But all Naruto did was walk up to the door, lifting an arm and resting the palm of his hand against the cool wood. And then, he pushed. Nothing happened. Naruto's face gained a frustrated expression as he pushed again, shoving all his weight into it. Minato blinked in surprise, having expected something much more hazardous, but it looked as if all his boy wanted to do was to open the door. He admitted that it had been a long time since Naruto had stepped out of his room. Kimiko-san had taken them out before, but she had not come to visit for 6 months now, and Minato would not be surprised if Naruto had forgotten about those cases already. A toddler's memories were short, and it was already quite an achievement from Naruto not to have forgotten about Kimiko-san completely. As it was, Minato knew that the only time he really thought of her was when the Sandaime came over with new gifts, and Naruto wondered why his Miko-san did not give him anything anymore. Naruto was still pushing at the door, his face gaining an unpleasant shade of red. His voice was loud, shrill in his desire. Out. Minato chuckled. Now that he had determined that going outside might not be a bad thing, he decided to help Naruto with this. Naruto-chan, he said, pausing a moment as he waited for Naruto to stop pushing and listen to him. Eventually, his boy did stop, panting heavily as he leaned against the door. Naruto-chan, that isn't the way to open a door. Tell me, how did you know that the door led to the outside anyway? Naruto blinked, taking a step away from the door and pointing one stubby finger towards his crayons, which the Sandaime had gotten him just 2 weeks ago. And then, he pointed towards the door. Gramps, go. Nurse go. You're so smart, Naruto. Minato couldn't help but coo, before calming down a little. You're right, of course. That is where Gramps and the nurses come and go. But think back, did they do anything special to get in and out of this room? Did they do anything to the door besides push it? A little Naruto's face screwed up in concentration, but Minato was sure that he would get it. Sure enough, it was only a moment later that Naruto's face lit up, and Minato didn't have to be able to read his mind to know that Naruto remembered. Doorknob, Minato beamed. Yes, Naruto, it's the doorknob. You have to turn it, remember? Alright, now try again. Happily, Naruto obliged, and this time he opened the door in one try. Naruto let out a whoop of joy, giving a quick thanks daddy before racing off into the corridors. Racing, of course, was a relative term. Naruto wasn't quite good enough on his feet to run yet, so he only walked as fast as he could. When he turned the corner, he made a step that was a little too big for his center of gravity to catch up to, and Naruto went tumbling to the floor. Minato had a little heart attack. Are you alright, Naruto-chan? Ow, Naruto bemoaned, but pushed himself to his feet anyway. It looked as if he were determined to not let a little bruise ruin his day. For a great deal of time they simply wandered around, lost. While Minato had memorized the routes when the Sandame or Kimiko-san had taken Naruto out, he did not know the layout of the whole orphanage. Naruto had gone the other way initially, into area that had remained uncharted for Minato. Thankfully, Naruto didn't seem to mind that he had no idea where he was going. That was the point of an adventure, after all. He was getting more and more excited with every step, babbling things to Minato that had started to sound nonsensical because he was talking so fast. Minato only laughed, and settled back in Naruto's mind, listening to his kid fondly. Soon though, Minato noticed that Naruto started to tire. It took him a moment to realize why. Naruto was not used to walking for long periods of time, and his long exploration had begun to wear him out. Naruto-chan, Minato spoke up, his voice gentle. I think that maybe it's time to go back now. But Naruto was having none of that. He plodded on resolutely ahead. No, come on Naruto, Minato coaxed, you could always do this another day too. It's not the end of the world if we go back for today. We can come back next time. Naruto didn't even appear to have heard him. No, Naruto, Minato sighed. He might have argued more, but he recognized bullheadedness when he saw it. Naruto was too much like Kushina to have Minato push him around. The thought of Kushina sent a stab of pain through his chest, but he consoled himself that it wouldn't be too long. Besides, what he was doing here was honoring her memory. With Naruto-chan's stubbornness, there could be no doubt that he was her son. And then, quite suddenly, Naruto came to a stop. He turned, almost toppling over as he did so, and pointed a chubby finger in the opposite direction to which he had been walking. Dada, me back. The elder blinked at the sudden turn of events, and then a light smile spread across his face. Stubborn as he was, it looked as if Naruto-chan could see reason too. Alright Naruto, don't worry, I know where to go. I win you lose. And 5 months, Konoha Orphanage Courtyard. They had made 8 trips outside of Naruto's room after the first one, but this was the first time that they had made it to this place. It took Minato only a moment to recognize it as the orphanage courtyard, where the children were often shooed out to play. He had only been here a few times to visit as the Hokage, but he still remembered it well. Open archways surrounded a large square field, and to the side of the field was a small playground with a slide, 2 swing sets, and 1 big sandbox. There were, Minato noted, quite a lot of children playing in the orphanage courtyard. It seemed that Naruto noticed too, because in the next instant the blonde had paused by the doorway, looking hesitant as large blue eyes swept the grassy field. Minato cocked his head, wondering what had gotten the normally expressive child so quiet, when suddenly he remembered all the books that Kushina had made him read about childhood development. He chuckled, a bit sadly, when he remembered the face she had made at him as she was explaining how boring those books were, and that she fully expected him to be there to tell her every little thing that she needed to do so that she wouldn't have to read them. His chest felt tight as he thought of her. He doubted he would ever stop thinking about her. It's all right, Naruto, Minato urged gently, drawing on his years-old knowledge. Toddlers needed a little pushing in order for them to interact with people they had not gotten used to during their infant years. Go on. It'll be fun. And just like the book predicted, that was all the encouragement Naruto needed. The blonde nodded once, and bounded over to a gaggle of children who were playing in the sandbox. They were all around his age, and their overseer had fallen asleep on a nearby bench. Naruto plopped himself down next to a boy with dark hair and murky brown eyes. The boy glanced over, looking distrustful. Introduce yourself, Naruto-chan, Minato said, sending an image of a person holding out their hand as they waited for their companion's reply. Minato had discovered that he could send images into Naruto's mind not too long ago. That was mainly due to the fact that Naruto had only begun to understand what was happening and speak clearly about it not too long ago. It was with a guilty feeling that Minato realized that he had probably been doing so before, but had not distinguished between thinking his own thoughts and sending them directly into Naruto-chan's mind. After he had found out what he could do, however, Minato had made sure to test what constituted as a thought that Naruto would see too, and by now he had gotten a good grasp of the art. It immensely helped both Naruto's development. While Minato could not be physically there for Naruto, at least he could show Naruto what he needed to do. Plus, it made bedtime stories that much more interesting. Naruto, for once, did not argue Minato's suggestion. Usually he would be sure to make a few complaints before following through, but Minato thought that just maybe Naruto was too nervous to do that this time. The blonde stuck out his hand. Hi. Naruto. The dark-haired boy blinked, looking confused, before he pointed a thumb at himself and beamed with pride. Me Shiori. In his excitement at making a new friend, Naruto didn't even notice that Shiori was supposed to have taken his hand and shake. Then again, Naruto didn't even know the meaning of a handshake yet, and Minato realized that the newly introduced Shiori probably didn't, either. He chuckled to himself. Whoops, wanna play? Naruto asked excitedly, allowing his arm to fall back to his side as he bounced around excitedly. Shiori nodded enthusiastically, but then seemed to pause a moment in thought. Play what? No fall. Shiori blinked, huh? Minato blinked, huh? Naruto gave his new friend the toothiest grin imaginable. Data teached me. Minato couldn't help but feel a slight flutter in his chest at Naruto's words, and what they implied. Oh, he knew Naruto had to listen to him, but it still made him feel special to hear his little boy confirm it with his own words. Still, he also knew that he shouldn't encourage the habit. Naruto was an orphan in the eyes of the world, and if he constantly talked about his data, people would start getting suspicious. A month ago, the Sandaime had nearly found out, and that thought sent Minato's heart racing. While he wouldn't have minded his predecessor figuring out that Minato was residing within Naruto's mind, as Minato did have much to tell the Hokage, the blonde also realized that it was not the time. Naruto had not developed enough to articulate well what Minato needed him to say, and he knew that there was a very real chance of him being mistaken for the Kyuubi if he did not make it explicitly clear that he was intended to be there. There was much to tell the Sandaime, but that, also, could wait. When Naruto gained more vocabulary, then Minato would begin thinking of a way to warn the Sandaime adequately. For now, Minato made a vague note to himself to speak about that habit with Naruto later. I done get it, Shiori admitted, who, not unlike Minato, was not following Naruto's thought process very well. Naruto pointed to the sand. See? No touch. Minato made a noise of understanding as he finally saw where Naruto was going with this. He couldn't help but chuckle slightly, and maybe even feel a bit flattered. And then, Naruto pointed to the assortment of plastic buckets and shovels that were lying around untouched. Land. Done with his explanation, Naruto turned and grinned at Shiori. Race? Minato had invented a game with Naruto to play when the blonde got too bored with his toys. Well, actually, Minato had invented many games, but it seemed as if Naruto had picked this one to share with his new friend. The rules were simple. The floor was the sea, and everything else was land. The goal was to get across the room without falling into the sea. The previous Hokage had invented it in order for Naruto to have fun, but there was a tiny voice in the back of his head that niggled at him about how great the game was for developing balance and spatial awareness. Minato resolutely ignored that voice. While he knew that Naruto would eventually have to begin ninja training so that he could cope with Madara, it didn't mean that it had to begin right now. Minato wanted his boy to have his childhood first. Shiori's face was scrunched up in confusion as he tried and failed to understand. Finally, he shook his head in frustration. No look fun. Me play sandcastle, Naruto gasped, and then his face too scrunched up, although it wasn't in confusion, sending an impending storm. And was that the crack of lightning he heard in the distance? Minato hurried to intervene. Wait, Naruto-chan, Shiori-kun here probably just doesn't understand how this game really works, which is why he doesn't want to play it. Your explanation was great, but I think he needs a demonstration too, just like the one I gave you. How about you show him first? The clouds on Naruto's face instantly cleared. Okay. Naruto chirped, and hopped over to the start line. Shiori frowned, but Naruto ignored him this time. The smaller blonde took a deep breath, and began hopping. He wobbled as he landed on the first plastic mold, and Minato had to wince slightly at the small crack that came from the toy. The game wasn't the best one to play without appropriate materials, but Minato couldn't very well take his permission back now that the game had started. Naruto-chan needed the confidence, and Minato was not going to take that away, even if it did involve breaking a few things. Naruto's arms cartwheeled, but he finally managed to bring himself back into balance. He was standing on one foot, the other a few millimeters from the ground. Shiori watched wide-eyed, and then Naruto sprung again, landing on the next plaything, and then the next and the next. Finally, he made it to the other end of the sandbox, and stood triumphantly, grinning at Shiori. By this time, it was not only Shiori who had taken notice of Naruto. All the children were chattering excitedly, pointing at Naruto and his course. Soon, it was revealed that they wanted to try too, and Naruto was more than happy to oblige. Race! Race! Naruto squealed, shooting back towards the start line. The others quickly followed, not wanting to be left out. Finally, they were all lined up on one end of the sandbox. One of the older kids decided to put himself down as the referee, probably because he was one of the only ones who could really count. Alright guys. 3, 2, 1. Go! There was a yell of excitement, and then things just went downhill. There were too many at once, and more kids drowned than landed on land. The children were pushing and shoving at each other, all intent on winning the race first. Minato felt a flare of worry. Naruto, maybe we shouldn't be playing this right now. You could get hurt. The game itself was one that had the danger of pain, but Naruto had played it so many times that Minato was hardly ever worried now about him falling. However, Naruto had never played it with other children before, some of which who were older than him. Minato was worried that he would get shoved and a fall in the sandbox couldn't be fun. Naruto, however, ignored him, just like he had always been doing recently when the situation didn't suit him. A lot of children fell and began crying, although Minato dryly noted that they were more shocked than in any actual pain. In some ways, children could be more devious than his best jounin. But it seemed like all the other toddlers understood the trick, because none of them paid any attention to the fallen ones. He, Naruto shrieked in excitement, shoving just as eagerly as the others. Unfortunately, all this noise woke their overseer up. Minato noticed out of the corner of Naruto's eye much too late, but even if he noticed it earlier, it wasn't as if he could have done anything. Naruto was too caught up with his new friends to listen to his father. The nurse stirred, blinking one eye open and squinting as she adjusted to the sun. And then, her gaze landed on the sandbox, and suddenly she no longer seemed sleepy. What is going on here? She shrieked, standing up in one hurried motion as she took a step towards the playground. Her eyes swept the area, taking in the scattered remnants of the crying orphans and the sight of the bigger toddlers looking as if they were engaged in a fight. Her face turned a bright red. The children engaged in the game of no fall froze. The woman put her hands on her hips, her eyes narrowing dangerously. All the children straightened, and Minato suddenly got the feeling that they knew her very, very well. Or they knew what she was like mad. Well, we play game, the boy who had counted down earlier said hurriedly. Thankfully, toddlers had no concept of tattling at the moment, because no one gave him harsh glares. Instead, they were all staring at their feet guiltily. The boy pointed at Naruto. He taught us. Unfortunately for the boy, Minato did have a very acute concept of tattling. He closed his eyes, and told himself that it was only a toddler, and it would be beyond ridiculous to get mad at a 3-year-old. It wasn't working very well. Inwardly Minato mused on how Kakashi might react if his mellow sensei stringed up some poor 3-year-old by the ankles and left him hanging there. Kakashi might even drop his mask in shock. That got him to chuckle, and to wonder where Kakashi was right now, but then the nurse began speaking again and Minato had to file the thought for later. Oh really? The nurse began, her voice sickly sweet. She turned to the blonde boy, the anger rolling off in waves. And then, she suddenly seemed to spot something, and her eyes flashed in recognition. The anger cooled, the tension leaving her body. When she spoke, her voice was as cold as the early frost. Ah, I see. Naruto, who had opened her mouth to say something, suddenly paused, shifting uncomfortably. Minato frowned sadly as the woman seemed to have recognized Naruto, once again not for whom he was, but for what he was. Naruto never did seem to do well around those people. I'm not sure who took you out of your room, brat, the woman continued, the tone of her voice making even the other children shiver. But you will not cause any more trouble here, understand? Naruto bit his lip, and looked down. Minato sighed, and sent an image of him ruffling Naruto's hair to the boy. Naruto didn't respond. Even after all this time, Naruto didn't know how to deal with the nurses. He had once tried to throw a temper tantrum with them as he had often done with Minato, but unlike Minato who at least tried to calm him, the nurses simply left. Sometimes they even gave Naruto a few choice words as a parting gift. While Naruto did not know what most of the words meant, he understood the tone easily enough. Naruto was an exuberant boy, but Minato was sometimes reminded very harshly that his Naruto was still very much a fragile child. Naruto, let's go, Minato said gently, I'll teach you a new game, alright? For the first time in a long time, Naruto didn't argue. Papier-mâché family, and 8 months, Naruto's room. Blue eyes were narrowed in concentration. His lips were pulled into a frown as he observed the piece of art, eyebrows drawn in contemplation. And then, Naruto shook his head, and threw what he had just made across the room. It hit the wall with a faint plop and slid down messily onto the tiled floors, leaving a trail of sticky white glue behind it. Ah, Naruto, Minato said with some strain in his voice, casting his eyes around desperately. The room was beginning to resemble a mini paper shredder with all the stray pieces of it scattered around the room, and the glue was not going to come off the wall unless they did something about it right away. You need to calm down a little. I know it's probably not what you envisioned, but I thought it was a lovely piece of artwork. Naruto's lips jutted out as he slapped the ground in front of him. It was covered with glue, no good. Daddy no like, Minato sighed. It seemed as if he wasn't allowed to like the previous crafts that Naruto had made. They had snuck out of Naruto's room again with the intent of exploring, or something like that. Minato had by now memorized the whole layout of the orphanage, and he couldn't say that going out now was as exciting as the first few times they had done it. Still, Naruto hadn't seemed to have tired of it yet, which was a good thing all things considered, especially since Naruto wasn't allowed to play with the other children. They had come across an open door, one that held a variety of children ages 3 to 5 within. They had been sitting behind long wooden tables, chattering elatedly and just generally having fun. On the tables were an assortment of colored paper and glue, and one look at the children made it obvious as to what they were doing. The orphanage had arranged for the children to make some crafts, which was something the younger children obviously enjoyed immensely. Naruto had not been invited. The look on Naruto's face had made Minato make a decision he was sure he wouldn't have made 3 years ago. "Hey Naruto-chan," Minato had said, "why don't we make some crafts too? Don't worry, we can do it in your room, but here's what we need to do." They had waited until the caretaker had left for a quick bathroom break, and then Naruto had hurried in and taken as much paper and glue as his little arms could carry. The other children had seen him, but Minato doubted that the nurses would do much about it even if they said anything. The nurses seemed to want to avoid Naruto more than anything else, and he was highly doubtful that there would be a confrontation. After all, Naruto making a few paper dolls could hardly harm anyone. They had come back to Naruto's room after that, just as Minato had promised. Thankfully, Naruto didn't seem to dwell on the bad things, or maybe that was just because he was young still, but by the time they had gotten back Naruto seemed to have completely forgotten about where he got the craft supplies, and simply cared about the fact that he had them. And then he started trying his best to make things, just as he had seen the other children do. Needless to say, he hadn't been very successful. If Minato were to be honest, Naruto's people, or animals, or houses, did seem to resemble colored blobs that were oozing with excess glue. Minato had tried to give some instruction, but he wasn't very good at this type of thing himself, and Naruto might have even gotten more confused. At least Naruto hadn't thrown a temper tantrum yet. Minato was getting a headache even thinking about how much of a disaster that would be with Naruto's new materials. Naruto thought aloud, stroking his chin. His hands, still covered with glue from the floor, spread the sticky white material all across his face. Minato winced. It was going to be a nightmare washing that out, especially when the nurses were none too gentle in giving the little blonde his baths. As time grew, Minato found himself becoming more and more frustrated with Naruto's treatment. He wasn't sure why that was. It had not changed a widget from when Naruto had first been placed in the orphanage. Perhaps Minato was just irate about the fact that nobody could see what a little angel his baby was despite the fact that Naruto had already been with them for nearly 3 years. Perhaps it was because he had nothing else to really occupy himself with outside of being mad. It did not bode well. Minato had very rarely gotten angry during his lifetime, and he did not understand what changed. Had death really been so hard on him? Or maybe, he thought hesitantly, or maybe it was simply the fact that I'm really missing Kushina. That explanation didn't quite seem to fit though. It wasn't that he didn't understand the nurse's plight. If it were not his own son who was Naruto, and if not for the fact that it was he who had doomed the boy to such a fate, Minato might have even taken a similar stance. He personally knew that he would wish to avoid the painful reminder of his losses every day. After all, the people were not blinded. They could be stupid, yes, but they were not blind. Minato knew for a fact that at least 90% of Konoha knew that little Naruto couldn't possibly be the QB reincarnate, but they simply chose to ignore that fact and able to have someone to push their own pain towards. Minato understood that. So why was it so hard nowadays to keep that calming outlook? It was all so muddled. Kushina was supposed to be the one who got angry and emotional. Minato was meant to be the one to calm everybody down and cheer everybody up. He was not supposed to be the one declaring death threats every time somebody glanced at him the wrong way. And then, quite suddenly, Naruto clapped his hands together, an enlightened expression on his face, and drawing Minato out of his thoughts. He quickly got to work, burrowing himself in deep concentration as he did so. Minato might have been impressed by it if it weren't for the fact that Naruto seemed to forget that Minato was there during that time, and couldn't hear anything Minato said as a result. The consequence: their once clean room had become the Cookie Monster's lair. Naruto worked furiously. If Minato thought that Naruto had been working hard before, the little boy was practically running laps around the walls of Konoha now. His tongue was poking out of the corner of his mouth as he tore up the untouched sheets of paper and swabbed them together in a pattern that he hadn't done before. When he was done, Minato's breath caught in the back of his throat. All those picture books, all those stories that he told. He had known that it wouldn't be a good idea. Naruto had made 3 figures. 2 tall, and 1 very small. The figures were standing side by side, the small one in the middle of the 2 tall figures. The one on the left kept toppling over because Naruto hadn't made it quite right, but Naruto was adamant in pushing it up every few seconds so that it would stay in its place. Finally, Naruto seemed to get fed up, and pushed out a swab of glue on the floor, and stuck the figure to the left within it so that it wouldn't fall over anymore. Minato could not find the words to scold him. Naruto beamed at his finished project, and quickly scooted back so that he could have a better look at them. He appraised them proudly, before tossing away the glue bottle and clapping his hands together. "Daddy-like?" Minato smiled weakly, and tried to say something. It came out sounding forced, a yes, very nice. Naruto giggled in delight, thankfully not having caught Minato's less than stellar response. He pointed to the figure to the right. "Dada." Minato briefly closed his eyes. He had thought it would be like this, but he had hoped. Naruto pointed to the figure in the middle. "Me, this hurt. This hurt a lot. Why did he have to go through with this?" Naruto pointed at the last figure, and Minato knew that the culmination of events could only lead to one ending. He almost wished that Naruto wouldn't say it, except that he knew it would be terribly unfair to the child, especially when Naruto had worked so hard for this. And then Naruto beamed, showing off all his teeth with his brilliant smile. Mummy, Minato swallowed, feeling his throat close up and something that felt suspiciously like tears sting his eyes. He pushed it all down, knowing that he had to say something and not caring if his voice came out a croak, because Naruto needed the assurance. Yes, Naruto, that's Mummy. Kushina, how I wish you were with us. Cloudy with a chance of rain. 3 years, 2 months old, Konoha orphanage. To be quite honest, Minato wasn't sure that Naruto was ready for the outside world yet. He was only 3 years old, and had only just learned to run properly. Still, the orphanage had been abuzz for weeks about the big news, and Minato had heard that the event was happening today. He wanted Naruto's first day outside the orphanage to be something special, and what was better than witnessing firsthand the signing of the Konoha-Kumo Treaty, something that was sure to bring peace. Certainly, Naruto wouldn't appreciate it as such, but Minato was sure that his boy would thank him when he turned older. Besides, it wasn't as if Minato was going to make Naruto stay for the whole thing. He would also take Naruto to the places that the 3-year-old would find interesting. He had told Naruto about his plans, and Naruto had hardly been able to sleep the past few days, so excited was he. He had been bouncing off the walls. Literally. It was another unfortunate game that Minato had thought would be good at the time, and turned out into something else under Naruto-chan's guidance. Now, the day had finally come. Naruto snuck out of his room easily enough. The gates were more of a problem. They were designed to be light enough for a full-grown adult to open, but heavy enough so that the children would have a hard time getting out. Thankfully, Minato knew a way around this too. Alright Naruto, now stick the seal on one of the bars, Minato instructed. Naruto nodded, and rummaged through his pockets. A few seconds later, he brought out a large, folded-up sheet of paper. He quickly unfolded it. At the center of the page was a unique drawing. It was a circle with many lines running across it, intertwined in complex patterns. The drawing was a lightning seal, meant to, make inanimate objects lighter. Minato had spent weeks instructing Naruto on how to draw this seal. They had created a mini mountain in Naruto's room with the amount of crumpled-up paper that Naruto had thrown when it was evident that he had yet again drawn it wrong. In fact, Naruto was having a lot of fun with that paper mountain, often using it as a slide whenever he couldn't go to the playground. To be honest, the seal still looked quite awful, but most of the lines were right. It was a very simple seal and the consequences of getting it wrong weren't immense, so Minato had been satisfied with it. There was also the fact that he didn't think Naruto could stand to make any more, no matter how bored he was. He wondered for a moment if this might be too suspicious. A 3-year-old able to craft a seal, no matter how simple. And then, he waved the thought off. He had specifically told Naruto to check out a book from the orphanage library about sealing, and that might be enough to fool those watching into thinking that Naruto really did create this all by himself. Naruto was an Uzumaki after all. Hold that? Naruto asked as he pressed the paper against the bars, using both hands to push it downwards. Good Naruto, Minato said, now push some chakra into it. Yes, just like we've practiced. Naruto was much too small to begin having chakra control, but thankfully, the Kyuubi allowed Naruto to be able to access chakra at this age. He couldn't really do anything with it at the moment, but seals did not need any amount of precision in the chakra released. As long as chakra was fed to them, the seals would active. Naruto bobbed his head to Minato's instructions, and screwed his eyes shut. He made a face of intense concentration, and shoved his chakra through. The next second there was a creaking sound, and all of a sudden Naruto found himself falling forwards as the gate swung open. Naruto, who had been leaning on the gate, fell face first into the ground. Minato hustled about worriedly. Naruto-chan, are you alright? Naruto opened his eyes, and the sight of dirt and grass met Minato's vision. Naruto's lower lip trembled, but then he seemed to take a deep breath and push himself up, even standing again. I'm good, he said determinedly, let go. Minato nodded, though inwardly still worried. Still, he knew that Naruto had at least 3 falls a day, so really, it should be fine. The small 3-year-old blonde started off on his journey, with Minato pointing out the directions to him. As they left the orphanage, Minato's eyes flickered to Naruto's right, noting that the ANBU station there had moved on too. It confirmed his suspicion that the Sandaime had thought to get protection for Naruto. Good. They hobbled over to the main streets of Konoha. Minato noticed that they were much emptier than he remembered, but that was probably because anybody who knew anything would be down at the treaty signing. Still, that didn't mean that nobody was there. Naruto looked around wide-eyed as he tried to take in everything at once. There was a general busy bustle about the street, with vendors shouting their wares and shopkeepers greeting old customers everywhere. Certainly, it was much more noise than Naruto was used to. The colors were quite amazing too. Even Minato had to admit that it was a bit of a shock after being confined in a rather gray building for the better part of 3 years. While it wasn't quite like how it got during festival time, the streets still did look very promising. Unfortunately, due to the fact that both of their attention were elsewhere, they didn't notice the man they were walking towards until it was too late. Naruto staggered suddenly as he bumped into the legs of a man, standing with his back face to them. At the sudden weight crashing into him, the man whirled around, his eyes narrowed as he looked for the offender. "Hey! Watch where you're!" The merchant began, only to stop mid-sentence as he finally got a good look at the person who had bumped into him way down there. He blinked and coughed, a blush spreading across his cheeks. "Oh, sorry." Minato couldn't help but smile at the statement. It was a welcome change from the types of adults that Naruto was used to. Naruto blinked his large, adorable eyes up at the man. "Okay." The man frowned, something akin to concern creeping up in his eyes. "Kid, shouldn't you be with your parents? Are you lost?" Naruto shook his head. "I lied in the orphanage." Minato had told Naruto not to tell anyone about him, but at the same time, he didn't quite want Naruto to start lying so young, so misdirection was the solution they had come up with. Well, misdirection was the solution that Minato had come up with, and Naruto just had to execute it. "Orphanage?" The man repeated, his eyebrows furrowing. Suddenly, recognition lit in his eyes, and his expression changed. When he looked at Naruto again, the hint of kindness previously displayed in the lines of his face was gone. Minato suddenly got a very bad feeling about this. Blonde, blue-eyed, and around 3 years old, the man spat, glaring daggers at the small boy. "I should have known." Minato closed his eyes. If he had known that the merchant would have turned out like this, he would not have let Naruto stay. The moment of kindness had misdirected Minato, and now Naruto would be paying the price. Inwardly, Minato cursed himself. Naruto curled in himself at the man's words. Although he couldn't have understood the man's meaning, he did understand that it was the same tone and the same cold eyes that the nurses always stared at him with. Naruto hadn't been able to stand it then, and he wasn't able to stand it now. The man sneered, and bumped past Naruto, causing the small boy to stumble. "Next time," he said coldly, "watch where you're going, brat." The rush of anger that followed the statement surprised even him. Minato snarled, yes, actually snarled, red clouding his vision for just a moment. How dare that man threaten the son of the Yondaime? How dare that pathetic excuse for a person hurt Naruto? Did he want to live? And then, just as quickly as the anger had come, it had left him. Minato blinked, disconcerted. He had not meant to think any of that. He had never gotten so angry in life, so why now? And then Minato's attention was drawn away as Naruto made a sniffle, rubbing hard at his eyes. "Naruto-chan," Minato said desperately, "don't listen to the mean man, please. Let's keep going, alright? Let's not let the mean man spoil the day." Naruto nodded in agreement, but Minato could tell that it was subdued. After that episode, the smaller blonde hadn't wanted to stay in the marketplace any longer. With a sigh, Minato started directing him towards the place the treaty signing would take place. Along the way, he tried a variety of ways to cheer Naruto up, ranging from telling funny stories to stating that he loved him. Thankfully, Naruto wasn't one to be depressed for long, and soon enough his boy was giggling again. They made it to the street that was holding the treaty signing in record time. Record time for being slow, that is. Minato didn't mind it one bit. Naruto slowed down when he was having fun, and if it so required, Minato would make sure that Naruto took years to get even to the Hokage Tower. There were a crowd of people amongst the streets, which was just about what Minato expected. Everybody wanted to see the Kumo Nin who would finally make peace with the land of lightning possible. Naruto's eyes had gone as wide as saucers. "There's so many." "Yes, Naruto-chan," Minato murmured, just a hint of amusement in his voice, "there are a lot. Unfortunately, with this many people we can't see the ambassador very well." Spotting an empty alleyway not too far from where they were standing, Minato quickly gave instructions to the place. Naruto nodded, and began moving. Thankfully he was still short enough to get past the legs of people as opposed to their bodies, which made maneuvering much more easier, as legs tended to take up less room. Soon, Naruto had found the spot which half hid him from the crowd, but easily allowed him to see the Kumo Nin. It really was quite a dirty place, and Minato wouldn't have been satisfied with it normally for his son, but this was a special occasion. It would be a mark in the history books, and he wanted it to coincide with the first day his son had gone out. Ichinen and Naruto frowned after 2 minutes. The Kumo ambassador was receiving congratulations from the other ninja, and replying with his own messages of flattery. Naruto made a face and stood. "Wait, Naruto," Minato said, instantly understanding Naruto's aim and trying his best to circumvent it. It wouldn't do for Naruto to leave before it all begun. "Stay here for a bit, please." Boring," Naruto complained, but obliged anyways. Minato smiled, and sent an image of a boy's hair being ruffled. His smile turned a bit sad and he couldn't help but wish that it didn't only have to be an image. "Thanks Naruto-chan, you're the best," Minato whispered. "I'll tell you a really cool story when we get back, alright?" Naruto's grin turned wider. "One about IWA?" he prompted, earning a laughing yes from Minato. And then, Naruto plopped to the ground, sitting down half hidden behind the wall still, but keeping the crowd of people in sight from the corner of his eyes. Done adjusting himself, Naruto picked up some stray twigs and stones, and started doodling on the road. Minato only sighed as Naruto's attention turned elsewhere, but he noticed from Naruto's stance that he himself was still able to see the happenings. He was surprised for a moment, before a soft smile spread across his face, and a warm tingling welled up inside his chest. Naruto was very thoughtful. Deciding not to waste his gift, Minato turned his attention back to the proceedings. The Kumo ambassador was talking easily enough with the major clan leaders of Konoha, and with Naruto's excellent hearing, Minato was even able to make out what they were saying. It felt refreshing to hear some language that was his level, even if Minato wasn't quite fond of flattery himself. And then, suddenly, the Kumo ambassador's line of sight changed. He had swept the crowds, using the gesture to emphasize something he said, when his eyes alighted upon Naruto. The Kumo ambassador's eyes flashed with something. Minato wasn't sure what, but suddenly he felt as if he didn't want to stick around to find out. Naruto! Naruto's head snapped up, catching the eye of the Kumo ambassador, whose eyes had narrowed before he turned back to the other nin, chatting as if nothing had transpired. Minato felt a wave of panic. Naruto, I think it's time to go, Minato said quickly, trying to keep his voice as calm and nonchalant as possible as to not startle his boy, but he was finding it hard. Thankfully, Naruto didn't complain about leaving. He had been getting more and more obedient over the past months, and was finally growing out of what had been universally agreed upon as the terrible twos. Minato couldn't be more glad for the timing. Naruto got up from his place on the ground, only brushing off his clothes at Minato's gentle reminder. Did you catch cold? Naruto asked curiously. There was a bit of a silence, in which Minato didn't really know what to say. He wasn't sure where the question had even come from. Still, he was touched by the thoughtfulness. No, Naruto-chan, but thanks for asking, Minato said warmly as Naruto bobbed his head down in pride and skipped out of the alley. Already he was feeling the sensation of danger leave him, and he couldn't help but feel that he had been a little foolish to be so alarmed back there. After all, Minato thought fondly, Naruto is a cute child. The Kumo ambassador probably just wasn't expecting that. There's no way that Naruto could be connected to me so easily. There are plenty of blonde orphans running around here. Still, there was no more reason to stay. Naruto have obviously gotten bored, and despite the logic of it all being nothing, Minato decided that it was better to be safe than sorry. Oh, by the way, that was a very nice bunny that you drew back there. The smile fell off Naruto's face, a glum expression crossing his features as he stared down at his shoes. It was a lion. Puzzle pieces, and 4 months, Naruto's room. Naruto was sprawled belly first across the floor, his chin resting on the palms of his hands as he squinted at the tome before him. He was propped up by his elbows, and occasionally he would slide one arm out to flip a page, which was very rare, or point to a word that he didn't know, which was much more common. He pulled the lever, Naruto. Labor all the way down to where it said full steam ahead. Minato beamed in pride as his son successfully read the last sentence on the page. Great job, Naruto. That was all correct. They'd been working on reading for ages now. Naruto hadn't been getting it very quickly, but Minato was patient. It helped that they didn't have a lot else to do, cooped up in Naruto's room as they were. Naruto closed the book with a soft twop, and pushed himself to his feet. Grabbing the book again, he toddled over to the large pile of picture stories stored in the corner of his room, and placed his book gently on the top stack. Minato had been adamant about keeping things clean, and now it had become habit for Naruto too. What next? Naruto asked excitedly, scrutinizing the pile of books with an almost expert eye. While Naruto hadn't taken to reading at first, when he realized that the best stories were told by books and that if he read them himself, then he wouldn't have to rely on his daddy, Naruto had become a regular bookworm. Minato chuckled. Naruto-chan, you've already read 3 books today. Wouldn't you rather do something else? Naruto thought for a moment, his head poised cutely to the side. Finally, he nodded. Okay. Game, Minato beamed. While he loved the fact that he had gotten his Naruto-chan reading, exercise was important too. Alright. Now, which game shall we play? Let's see, we played mixed match yesterday, so how about here's a game we haven't played in a while. Do you still remember this one, Naruto? The floor is the sea, the carpet is the land, and you. No fall, Naruto said, but Minato noticed that there was something wrong with his voice. Naruto was looking down now, tugging at the edge of his shirt. I don't wanna play that. Minato opened his mouth, and then closed it. To be honest, he had forgotten about that disastrous day in the courtyard where Naruto had gotten in trouble for playing a game that Minato had made up. It looked like Naruto still hadn't quite gotten over it yet. A small frown spread across Minato's features. Now that he thought about it, there were a lot of things his Naruto-chan didn't do that could be attributed to a past event. Such a trait would not do. He did not want Naruto to become a turtle who hid from the world. That decided, Minato decided to change topics. He smiled, making sure to keep his voice light. Alright then, if you don't want to play that game, it's fine. Say, it's been quite a while since we ventured outside. You've been cooped up for 2 months. So, what do you say to taking a break and going out to play today? A look of panic flashed across Naruto's face, and he instantly turned back to his book stack. No. I want to read more about George. I knew it, he really is afraid of the outside. It isn't even the novelty of it. It's the villagers. George will still be here when we come back, Minato said gently. He's a tough little monkey. Come on, Naruto, you haven't been outside since our last little outing 2 months ago. Surely you don't want that to be your last trip? Naruto's face fell. I don't really like the outhide. Can't we just stay in here? The look on Naruto's face almost made Minato give in. Almost. Just this once though, Minato knew for a fact that what he had suggested was better for Naruto in the end, so he didn't let up. Come on Naruto, I'll be there with you. What's there to be scared of? Not scored. Just don't wanna. Minato frowned slightly. Naruto could talk much better now, and very rarely dropped pronouns. It spoke to how worried the little blonde was. He let out a sigh. He supposed that the best way to do this was to get to the root of the problem. Naruto, you don't like the looks that the other adults give you, right? Minato said tenderly, but it's alright, really. The villagers are scared of things that they shouldn't be, and fear makes them act irrationally. They don't really mean to hurt you, so just ignore them for now. Let's have fun doing the other things that can be done outside. Naruto frowned doubtfully, and Minato waited patiently for his reply. He knew he couldn't rush his baby's answer. Why? Naruto finally said, sniffling. At any other time Minato might have smiled, because the 5Ws were quickly becoming Naruto's favorite words, but Naruto had asked it at a hard time this time. Minato sighed deeply, wondering if one day Naruto would be able to understand them, because they are ignorant, Naruto. They have not seen what a great boy you are. Don't worry, one day, you'll change all of that, and they'll come to love you. You're too good of a boy for that not to happen. Trust me. Naruto shuffled his feet around, looking disbelieving but at the very least, willing to trust his daddy. Oh, okay. Good, Minato smiled. Now, shall we get going? After a quick clean up and pat around to make sure that they had brought everything that they needed, Naruto finally snuck out of his room. He was being very slow about it, practically dragging his feet, but Minato couldn't blame him. Finally, they arrived at the orphanage gates. Using a spare lightning seal he had made, Naruto easily pushed open the gates. He did not so easily step outside, however. Naruto simply stood there, seemingly frozen in time, his hands still half holding the gates open as he stared at the large expanse outside the orphanage. Blue eyes were wide with fear, and faint tremors suddenly began reeking his body. I still, Naruto began shakily, and couldn't continue. Minato felt his heart give a quiver, and all thoughts of going out nearly disappeared. He had not thought it would be this bad. Quite suddenly, all the resolve he had gathered to force his baby into the marketplace withered and died. I understand, Minato said gently. Alright, we don't have to go back if you really don't want to. I'm sorry for trying to make you, Naruto. Naruto looked down, tears in his eyes. I don't want to disappoint you, daddy. You'll never be a disappointment to me, Minato said soothingly. Truly, we can go back. He trailed off as something which he had simply taken for granted was suddenly pushed to the forefront of his mind. A slow smile spread across Minato's lips. He believed he had just found the perfect solution. How about this? Minato asked with a lot more cheer in his voice. Since I still think you need to play outside more often, and I know that you like being out here, so why don't we just play in an area that doesn't have any nasty folk? Would you be alright with that? Naruto sniffled, and rubbed at his face. The forest, Minato replied gently. You've read about that, right? There's usually no people, and lots of animals and plants for you to play with. What do you say? Normally he might have been worried about Naruto running into unpleasant animals or other such things in the forest, but it was at times like these that it was very convenient to have an ANBU guard with them. Naruto smiled, brilliantly, and Minato just knew that he made the right choice. Survival tests, and 5 months, Academy Forest. The birds chirped merrily as they flew past each other, telling of their great adventures in evading the two-legged predators and bragging of their individual morning meals. Occasionally they would land on a branch to rest their wings, only to spring up again at the slightest movements. The trees themselves would wave goodbye, their branches oscillating long after the birds had disappeared. The taller trees made no break in their greetings, with the wind lending them their strength. The scent of honeysuckle and fresh wood permeated the air, enticing the small critters to scurry out of their underground homes to bask in the feel of the forest. The afternoon sun shone brightly, giving the whole place a warm, enchanting glow. Naruto hummed softly under his breath as he plodded along the forest trail, eyes alight with excitement. Minato had been right in predicting that his little ball of energy would fit right in with the rest of nature, and he even had proof. Whenever Naruto had free time, he would beg for Minato to take him to the forest, where he could point things out and wonder at animals. Other than being a great outlet for Naruto's energy, and not to mention a nice way build up muscle, the forest had also become a place of learning. Minato was by no means a botanical expert, but he did know the basics needed for survival, and he taught Naruto such. They'd been here so many times that Naruto had even started being able to distinguish between the different types of herbs. Overhead, the ANBU guard watched Naruto silently, always making sure that the blonde did not get into too much trouble. Minato had done what he could, guiding Naruto to the forest reserved for academy students, and the ANBU guard made short work of the rest. What's that? Naruto asked as he came to a stop, pausing so that he could point one stubby finger at an unfamiliar plant. He did that often, and Minato would answer just as if he were teaching Naruto about his furniture all over again. Minato took a moment to examine the plant, the images of various flowers coursing through his head. When he realized which one it was, he smiled. It's marjoram, Naruto. It's a great spice to use when you've just caught fresh meat, which is rather tasteless if I must say. Naruto nodded, his tongue rolling with the new word as he committed it to memory, marjoram. They continued on their way. It was afternoon already, and soon it would get dark. The difference might not be so noticeable in the village, but it would be huge in a forest such as this. Naruto knew that Minato would ask him to go back soon, so little Naruto wanted to get as much exploring done as possible. Minato watched in contentment as Naruto ran around chasing butterflies for a bit more, but eventually, it was time to go. He opened his mouth to tell his son so, when suddenly, they heard some voices. Aight. As if Shiro. Who was the one who failed the survival portion of the exam last year? Naruto, ever the curious one, stopped chasing his butterfly and instead, started towing towards the voice. Minato found that he was curious too. Although the tone was crass, the voice itself was high-pitched and feminine, pointing to a small girl. Plus, the ANBU had evidently not seen these people as a threat, so it should be relatively safe. When they made it to the source, they spotted 3 children sitting in a small clearing, backpacks scattered across the field. Naruto quickly hid behind a tall tree, observing them from a distance. There were 3 boys. One was holding up something that looked like a mushroom, while the other 2 stared at him contemplatively. They looked to be about 8 years old. Minato blinked, and belatedly realized that they must have been here for the survival test, where the academy's students had to stay in the forest for one night and survive. It was actually the safest activity ever, as there was nothing in the forest that could possibly hurt anyone, but the students didn't know that. He did remember going through it when he was younger. So Yuta, do you think this is edible? The boy holding the mushroom was saying, turning to look at the boy with red hair. With a flush, Minato realized that the one holding the mushroom wasn't a boy at all, but rather, a girl. Her coal black hair was cropped short just like a male's, and her clothing did not distinguish her sex. But when she had turned her head, Minato had caught a glimpse of her face, and he knew then that mixed with the sound of her voice, she could definitely not be classified as a boy. The boy dubbed Yuta replied, looking as if he were thinking hard as his brown eyes scrunched up in thought. His pallid face was dotted with freckles, which only served to look more ridiculous as his overly large glasses slid slightly off the bridge of his nose. I think so, Kaoru. That mushroom, it doesn't have any bad spots, does it? Naruto gasped, and hopped out of his hiding place. Kaoru, who had her back facing them, didn't notice, but the other 2 boys did. Their eyes widened considerably as Naruto pointed one accusing finger at the mushroom. That's poisonous. Kaoru snapped around. Holy shit, what? And then, the boy who hadn't spoken yet, which Minato could only presume to be Shiro, let out a loud, exuberant laugh. Wow, amazing kid. See Kaoru, I told you, that mushroom's no good. Naruto, who had flinched back from Kaoru's yell, suddenly beamed at the dark-haired boy's praise. Blue eyes lit up as he emerged from the woods, running over to where the 3 were seated. And then, he took a deep breath, examining the mushroom closely before nodding seriously. That's cliticide, far sir. Kaoru was apparently too stunned to stop him. Shiro's grin went from ear to ear. He turned lazy black eyes to the only female member of the group. Didn't I tell you, Kaoru? You shouldn't have doubted my all-seeing eyes. Stop making fun of the Hyuga, the boy wearing glasses, Yuta said in a clipped tone, and the mushroom was not dangerous. Cliticide is how should I put this? It makes you poop, Naruto concluded, nodding his head sagely. Kaoru face-palmed, and Shiro let out another rambunctious laugh. Yeah, the girl muttered as she hit Shiro across the shoulder. Laugh it up. You kid are awesome, the dark-haired boy said lightly. He reached out a hand, a wide smile spread across his face. I'm Shiro, by the way, and I'm not afraid to make fun of the people who deserve it. You can count on me to back you up. Yuta and Kaoru shared a glance, which Minato not failed to notice. It went over Naruto's head though as the little blonde-haired boy took the hand with a giggle. I'm Naruto. A good name, Shiro murmured with a small grin as he shook the blonde's hand gently before letting go, earning another beam of delight from the little ray of sunshine. Looking as if he had decided that it would be his turn next, Yuta pushed his glasses up, the reflected light blocking out his eyes. Minato couldn't help but wonder amusedly if he were related to the Chunin named Ebisu, who delivered his reports in a similar manner. I am Shirayama Yuta, date of birth January 8th, age 9, gender male, height 1.3 meters, weight 27.5 kilos, blood type B. It is my pleasure to meet you. Kaoru made a face. Quit it, Yuta. You're going to scare the kid. As much as I'd hate to agree with the she-devil, Shiro said teasingly, I think you should tone it down a little, Yuta. Don't need to be so nervous, Naruto here's only a 5-year-old. 3, Naruto piped up. Eh? Shiro turned back to Naruto with an amused look in his eyes. What's that? I'm 3 years old. Naruto said with a big, toothy grin, holding up 3 fingers. Shiro blinked, and blinked again. And then, his jaw slackened. What, seriously? For the love of all that's holy, Kaoru said in surprise, we got outsmarted by a 3-year-old. Damn Naruto, you're good. Yuta pushed the still blinking Shiro to the side as he leaned in closer, the tip of his nose practically touching Naruto's. The brown-haired boy's eyes narrowed as he carefully scrutinized every inch of Naruto's face, although Minato seriously doubted that the close proximity would allow him to see much. Naruto giggled. Yuta said as he pulled back, pushing up his glasses once again. Very interesting. It seems that our little boy here is something of a prodigy. Off to the side, Shiro rolled his eyes good-naturedly. You didn't have to go in close to come to that realization. Yuta gave a loud sniff, crossing his arms and looking away, ignoring the other boy. Pro-DEGY? Naruto asked in confusion, as Minato had never mentioned the word to him before. It means you're smart, kid, Kaoru said as she ruffled Naruto's hair. She had a slight but kind smile on her face. I'm Kaoru, by the way. I'm the eldest here. In both age and mentality, but not in intelligence, Shiro piped up and winked at Naruto. That title belongs to our little Naruto here. It was Minato who was the one who beamed in pride. His Naruto was smart indeed. He was starting to really like these kids. If he could take another genin squad right now, they would be it. Anyways, Naruto, Kaoru said, a curious tone in her voice as she completely dismissed the dark-haired boy. If you're only 3, what are you doing in the forest all by yourself? Or are you lost? The other 2 boys shared a glance behind Kaoru's back and nodded in agreement. I was chasing Butterfly-chan, Naruto said, puffing up his chest. And then, he hesitated, no doubt remembering his father's warning about not revealing anything about him. Instead, Naruto waved vaguely in the direction where he had come from, and I'm not by myself. There's an ANBU with me. They never come out to play dough. Out of the corner of Naruto's eyes, Minato saw the ANBU stiffen in surprise. He winced slightly. It might not have been wise on Naruto's part to reveal that he was aware of them. It would be another report that would go back to Sarutobi and only serve to make the Sandaime more confused. The 3 9-year-olds' reactions were much easier to map. 3 pairs of eyes widened in surprise, and just the slightest bit of all. Shiro turned his head, face half hidden from Naruto, but Minato could read his lips anyway. Clan heir? Shiro mouthed, a questioning look on his face. Yuta, at whom the comment was directed at, shook his head. Kaoru only let out a low whistle. Hot damn. That's something, Naruto. Stop swearing around a kid, Shiro said weakly, brushing Kuro's arm with a good-natured punch. Kaoru rolled her eyes. Whatever. Naruto gained a curious expression on his face, and in that instant Minato just knew that Naruto was going to ask what swearing was. Hastily, Minato moved to intervene. Naruto, can you ask them why they're all taking this survival exam together? He had not allowed Naruto to hear any bad words as of yet, and he did not want Naruto to know of them until he was much older. He had let Kaoru's previous language go because he had been so delighted to find people who treated Naruto nicely that he hadn't really registered that he might not want those words around his baby. But now that it was explicitly clear, he would do his best to prevent that meeting. Naruto nodded, and did as his father asked. The 3 looked surprised at the question, but it was Yuta who spoke first. Ah, so you know about that too then? How interesting indeed. We have known each other since our youth, and we have decided that this test is best taken with people who can be explicitly trusted. Yeah, we're like childhood friends or something like that. Kaoru snorted at the implications, but it's only cause our parents work together on the same squad. Yep, Shiro chipped in. They wanted us to be all friendly-like, and now it's gotten into habit to have Kaoru's yapping in the background. Couldn't relax if I didn't hear her dulcet tones. I'd be worried all day about when she'd unexpectedly pop up. He winked conspiratorially at Naruto. Naruto giggled. They spent quite a bit more time talking and just generally playing around, despite the sky getting dark and the chances of Minato getting Naruto out before evening fell grew less and less. Naruto just looked so happy, and Minato didn't have the heart to tell him that they should go. Thankfully, it seemed that they had arrived at the last day of the Academy survival test, because before long, a loud, chiming bell rang across the forest, signaling the end to the test. Naruto had been very visibly upset when the 3 Academy students told him that they had to go, but he brightened when they told him where to visit. All of that done, they headed back to the school grounds, waving goodbye to Naruto and erecting a promise from him to visit. And then they were gone, leaving Naruto standing alone in the clearing. Naruto's head was bowed, his blue eyes wide. Minato felt a tingle of worry course through him as he wondered if Naruto was really alright with them leaving. He opened his mouth. Naruto. They had warm eyes, Naruto said as he looked up, interrupting Minato with a small flush on his cheeks. I think that I'll jibe the village another taui, to catch a scarecrow. And 8 months, Konoha Market Square. And what's that one, Naruto? Minato asked with a smile, bringing up the picture of the article situated slightly to their left. Naruto turned towards the item, squinting his eyes as he thought hard about it. Finally, he nodded confidently, and pointed one chubby finger at the vegetable, asparagus. Minato beamed in pride. That's correct. They were learning their words in the marketplace, and Minato couldn't think of a better place to do it. The different scents and sounds really seemed to help out Naruto somehow, as if he were more motivated to learn in a crowded setting. They were currently inspecting a vegetable stand, though some distance away as to not disturb the business. The man tending the stand thankfully ignored them, allowing the 2 to continue on with their day of learning. Minato pointed out another piece of produce, and that one, clementine. Good. You're amazing, Naruto. Wow, I think you got all of them on this cart. Should we move on to another stand? Naruto nodded happily, and whirled around, intent on finding another booth to test his skills in memorizing the different objects of the world. He was used to this routine by now. Naruto looked around, his head going wildly to and fro as he tried to seek out another place to start. Naruto didn't go by convention, much preferring to learn what looked interesting rather than go row by row. Minato didn't discourage the habit. Minato hummed as he followed Naruto's gaze, making it a game to try and figure out what stand Naruto would choose. There was very little to do in his life, stuck in Naruto as he was, and he had to make up some forms of entertainment for himself. It was then that he noticed a distinctive but familiar head of hair poking out amongst the crowds. Naruto's gaze had moved on, but Minato wasn't letting it go that easily. "Hold up, Naruto, look to your right!" Minato cried, his voice just slightly higher pitched than usual. Naruto's eyes widened, startled and confused, but he did as his father asked. He had never heard Minato sound like that before, and Minato would have felt bad for scaring him, but his attention was solely focused on the figure he had thought he had seen. When Naruto turned his attention back to the area, and his eyes caught the unique form of the person again, Minato knew he wasn't wrong. There was no mistaking that flyaway silver hair, the tipped high-tie, or that thin black mask. Hatake Kakashi was standing with his back ramrod straight in the middle of Konoha Market Square, looking intently at the arrangement of canned fruits set before him. There was no doubt that he was planning to buy his next assortment of nutritious if not tasteless foods, all for the sake of completing the mission. A hail of memories flooded Minato. How could he have forgotten about Kakashi? Minato was no fool. He knew that he was the closest thing that Kakashi had to another father, despite the fact that Minato was nothing like Hatake Tsukumo. The blonde could not have hoped to match the ancient war hero in terms of paternity, as he had only been 17 when Kakashi was put onto his squad, and to be honest, Minato had been a little overwhelmed by the job at that time. He did not know how to care for a 5-year-old, especially when that 5-year-old did not seem to want any caring. Nevertheless, one could not be on the same team for 8 years without growing bonds, and with their age difference, Minato's attitude, and Kakashi's past, it only made sense that the silver-haired boy had started to see something of a father in Minato. Minato had not been blind to it. He saw the way that the boy had hung on to his every word, only disobeying when his personal grievances against his real father came into play. And then, Minato had given his life to seal the Kyuubi, and Kakashi had been left alone again. There was still Rin, of course, but one person made a very short list of people that Kakashi could rely on. Before Obito's death, and that thought still sent a pang through Minato's chest, for he had failed Obito, Kakashi had made no efforts to find people whom he could share his pain with, and Minato had no doubt that fact never changed. The boy had only been 14 years old, and he had lost another father figure again. Minato felt so absolutely stupid and maybe just a bit cruel to have forgotten completely about his student. Naruto was not the only one who needed him, and yet by the time that Minato had come out of his self-imposed exile in Naruto's mind, Naruto was the only one he could see that needed help. Because of that, he had forgotten that there were others too in the world. Because of that, he had forgotten that there were still people yet who lived and needed life. He could not believe that he had been so wrapped up in Kushina's legacy that he had even forgotten about Kakashi. "Naruto," Minato whispered in quietly, urgently, "see that man over there with the spiky silver hair and black mask? We've got to go see him." Naruto bobbed his head obediently, not imagining that his father would request anything that was unreasonable. There was no doubt in Minato's head that Naruto thought this was just another game that he was inventing, when in reality, it was anything but. As they neared Minato's old student, Minato began to see things more clearly. Naruto skillfully weaved his way through the prongs of rushing people, but for once, Minato's attention wasn't on his son. There was a slump in Kakashi's shoulders that Minato had never seen before, not even when they had been forced to kill hundreds during the Great War. The way he was talking to the stand owner was more short and crisp than ever before, and there was an alertness in his stance that bespoke of borderline paranoia. It was worse than he had imagined. And then, the scent of blood and kunai instantly assaulted Naruto's nostrils, though of course Naruto couldn't distinguish what they were. Minato gasped. He knew that there was only one reason that Kakashi would smell like that and look as tired as he did, especially since they were no longer at war. Kakashi had joined the ANBU. It was the last thing he had wanted for any of his students. The Ansatsu Senjutsu Takushibutai were a special squad of ninja that specialized in assassination and working from the shadows. One could apply for it as soon as they reached Chunin, though of course very few actually passed the test. To be ANBU was not glorious, and the only thing it guaranteed was endless slaughter and a quiet death. Honestly, only those with the strongest wills, who would not mind dying nameless for the sake of their village, should have been in ANBU, but many a times the place had turned into a haven for those who did not want to deal with life. Minato was very afraid that Kakashi had joined not for the former reason, and then Kakashi turned around. It was not for any particular reason. The store owner had finally finished packaging Kakashi's request, and the Jounin was reaching into his pocket for money. Unfortunately, that reach had caused him to turn his body slightly, and it was towards the direction Minato and Naruto were coming from. The silver-haired boy's soul eye widened, and Minato knew that he had spotted Naruto. Kakashi immediately turned back to the shopkeeper, muttering a few quick words. The store owner nodded as Kakashi inclined his head in thanks, and put his hands up in a very familiar seal. Minato inwardly cursed, "Hurry Naruto, he's going to." A swirl of leaves later, and Kakashi had disappeared, leaving only an exasperated shopkeeper behind. Naruto's eyes widened adorably. He disappeared. The shopkeeper smiled when he heard a child's voice and glanced down, only to frown when his eyes skimmed over the whisker marks on Naruto's cheeks and turn away again. Naruto didn't even pay it any attention. He was far too used to it by now. "Yes, Naruto, he did," Minato said softly, just barely holding back a sigh. It was not that he did not understand why Kakashi might not have wanted to see Naruto, but personally he had been hoping for the other case. Wow, Naruto murmured in amazement, "So cool." Despite himself, the older blonde could not help but smile at his son's enthusiasm. He reminded Minato of another child who had been easily impressed by the shinobi arts. That child had turned out to be the love of his life. "Naruto," Minato said suddenly, "that was your Kakashi Nizan. I was his teacher when I was before you were born. You remember all those stories you read about big brothers? Well, he is like that with you." For some reason, that caused Naruto's good mood to disappear. He frowned, suddenly gaining a melancholy air. Minato blinked. He would have thought that Naruto would be happy to gain more family. And then, Naruto spoke again, and it all became clear. But if that's so, then he didn't like me." He ran away. Minato could have slapped himself for missing it earlier. Of course Naruto would take it the wrong way that Kakashi had left like that. Indeed, if Minato guessed correctly, Kakashi did not want to see Naruto, but it would not be for the same reasons that the villagers had. Kakashi had more to his circumstances, but Minato could not expect his 3-year-old to understand that. "It's like a hide-and-seek game, Naruto," Minato reassured his boy. He almost felt a little guilty for using his boy like this, but he had ignored his responsibilities for long enough, and besides, he was sure that every word he was saying was true. "I'm sure Kakashi will love you very much, but he's kind of afraid of people, so you have to catch him first before he'll see that you're not so scary." Naruto frowned thoughtfully, and for a moment Minato was worried that his explanation wasn't enough, but then his son gave an energetic nod, a bright smile crossing his face. He patted his chest, sounding much too understanding for Minato's taste. "He's like me, right? I know what it's like to be scored. Okay. I'll convince Kakashi Nizan that there's no need to be scored of people." Minato smiled sadly, wishing that Naruto didn't have to understand. Still, what was done, and it had given Naruto a wisdom beyond his years. "Thank you, Naruto. I'm sure Kakashi will appreciate you very much." He wondered if Rin was hiding somewhere out there, too. Minato decided that he needed to keep an eye out for her. But first things first, he needed to drag Kakashi out of his slump and back into the world of the living. Hidden. And 9 months, the flouncing frog. The beat of the music was hypnotic, lulling the occupants of the room into a serene daze. Despite the fact that it was a bar, and not a club, the dim lighting and the musky scents in the air made the place seem more sensual than it actually was. It was not surprising for a place named as a tribute to Jiraiya-sama. Hatake Kakashi sat on one of the stools at the very corner of the bar, his eye hooded as he sipped at his drink and observed the general atmosphere around him out of his peripheral. People were chattering incessantly about their lives or things that did not pertain to their lives in an effort to forget everything miserable for the night. A lot of good humor but also a faint sheen of desperation in their eyes. Some were dealing with it better, looking as though they had actually moved on with their lives or they were just hiding it better. Anyone who got near Kakashi was met with stone-cold silence, and an impassive stare that was somehow more intimidating than glares. They left quickly after that, not completely able to hide the uncomfortable tilts of their shoulders. It was not that Kakashi wanted to purposefully make them uncomfortable. Unlike some, he did not take joy in watching people squirm. Quite simply, he had nothing that he wanted to talk to with anyone. He did not want to make friends only to watch them leave him, and he did not want to waste time on small talk that was sure to bring him nowhere. If others approached, that was their decision, but whether or not he obliged them was his decision. The Hatake genius shifted in his seat, adjusting his position to a more comfortable one as he took another swig of his bottle. To be honest, he did not like the bar, the drinks tasted nasty, and the girls were annoying. But he had felt like coming here tonight, for some sentimental reason or another. The silver-haired teen had thought he had stamped it out of himself, but sometimes the feelings did come creeping back, and he was as susceptible to them as anyone else. His birthday was coming up, but Kakashi did not feel like celebrating it. There would be no one to celebrate it with, anyhow. The silver-haired shinobi swirled the drink in his hands, watching as the liquid sloshed to and fro from one side of the bottle to the other. He was turning 17 in a few weeks. It would be just 1 year to add to the life that he had been allowed due to the sacrifices of his teammates. He'd somehow managed to survive nearly 4 years in ANB while all around him, his teammates died. He thought if he grieved anymore, even his body would simply fall apart, and so he'd become numb. Numb to the world around him, and numb to the things that he felt inside. He wasn't sure he was succeeding very well, but it kept him going, and that was all he needed. So long as his nightmares and flashbacks did not affect his performance, nobody cared, and he did not want anybody to. He did not want to be taken off ANBU. The work was tough, and scarring, but the constant workload kept Kakashi's mind off the memories he so desperately wanted to avoid. He wasn't sure what the alternative would be, but he did not want to find out. And then, the little blonde thing had popped into his life. The first day in the marketplace had been a pure coincidence, and Kakashi had been shocked beyond all measure to see his sensei's son standing so innocently among the villagers. He had known logically that Namikaze's Naruto would be somewhere in Konoha, but the child had been kept out of the public's eye for the better of the past 4 years that Kakashi had nearly forgotten about him. He'd left right away. The dazzling features and familiar Uzumaki's smile had ripped Kakashi's heart, bringing to the surface the memories that Kakashi had worked long and hard to bury. He had to leave, or risk breaking down. To be honest, Naruto did not look much like Uzumaki Kushina or Namikaze Minato at his age. He was only 3 years and 9 months, which was not old enough for someone to have distinguishing features. Still, with Kakashi's knowledge of who Naruto really was, the connections were all too easy to draw, and there was no avoiding the fact that the new Jinchuriki of Konoha was his mentor's son. Kakashi had hoped to never see the child again, or, if that were too unrealistic, to at least never be in his line of sight again. But that was not to be. After that incident, Kakashi not go outside without seeing the blonde. He did not know if Kami were playing a trick on him, or if he were just really that unlucky, but every time he went to the marketplace, the 3-year-old would be there, and the 3-year-old would not just stand there. If he spotted Kakashi, he would chase after the silver-haired teen, although Kakashi could not for the life of him figure out what would make the child act that way. So far, the ANBU genius had been able to escape every time, but it was getting tiresome. He didn't know why the child would chase after him. A 3-year-old by all rights should not know that Kakashi was supposed to be taking care of him instead of wasting away in ANBU. A 3-year-old should not know that Kakashi was neglecting his duties, and yet a 3-year-old did. And every time Kakashi was spotted by the little boy, he was stricken by guilt of what he had neglected. It was as if Minato's ghost had come back to haunt him. Kakashi smiled bitterly at the thought, his eyes gaining a more empty quality to them. While he was not superstitious, the allegation was true enough. Minato-sensei would not be pleased with what he was doing with himself. Still, even though he knew that, there was nothing else that he could do. He could never be the perfect person that Minato-sensei would have been happy with, that Rin definitely wanted, and that Obito needed. It was then that Kakashi noticed that someone else was approaching him, and that observation brought him out of his thoughts. Even while thinking, Kakashi had attention on his surroundings. It had been this habit more than anything else that had kept him alive all these years. It was just an observation like any other, and Kakashi wasn't going to pay it much mind, until the stocky figure and the square features registered in his mind. Kakashi turned his head ever so slightly and nodded towards his new neighbor. Sarutobi Asuma was one of the few shinobi that Kakashi did know outside of missions. Out of all of Kakashi's acquaintances, Asuma was the one least annoying. He at the very least knew when to keep quiet. Hey, Asuma smiled as he slid into a seat beside Kakashi. He waved the bartender over, and quickly gave his order. It's your birthday soon, isn't it, Hataki? Happy birthday. Please don't, Kakashi said flatly, turning back to face the front and silently wondering if he'd been too early to judge Asuma as not annoying. He took another swig of his bottle, only to find no liquid coming to meet his lips. Frowning, Kakashi tilted the neck of his bottle over, revealing clear sparkling water droplets sticking to the inside. He had finished the water he had brought to the bar, and he was not going to order another drink from the bartender. The ANBU did not drink. They did not know when a mission might come up, and they always had to be alert. There was no rest for the Ansatsu Senjutsu. He slid off his stool. There was no point in staying here any longer. What? Leaving so soon? Asuma asked as he eyed Kakashi critically, leaning back against the long table at which they were sitting. There are things to do, Kakashi said briskly, brushing past the heavier shinobi and heading towards the door. Geez, Asuma muttered to himself, before raising his voice slightly as he called out to the departing Kakashi. It wasn't loud enough to attract everybody's attention, but it was certainly loud enough to get a few. Hey, it's rare to see you by yourself nowadays, Kakashi. Where's that little blonde growth that's attached himself to you? Not here, Kakashi said flatly, turning back around just to stop Asuma from telling every single shinobi present his little problem. This is a bar. In the span of the time that Kakashi had turned his back on the brown-haired man, Asuma had somehow lit a cigarette and put back his lighter. He still looked as relaxed as ever. So you're avoiding the kid, Asuma said as he took a puff of smoke, thankfully lowering his voice. Why? Kakashi did not answer. He wondered if everyone would be on his case for that. Even Guy had noticed Naruto's strange attachment to the silver-haired jounin. Kakashi was not stupid. He knew that everybody who knew him was probably wondering what he'd do to a child who was being too nosy, but he had never thought that Asuma would be one of those who fell in with the crowd. He wanted to for once and for all to stop the questions, even if it meant poking into places which were expressly forbidden. You've taken up smoking, he observed. Asuma's eyes glittered, and Kakashi knew he had guessed rightly. Ah yes, it seems like everyone's taken up a vice now that the yondaime has died. Asuma suddenly paused, and Kakashi knew he had messed up. Kakashi did not mean to seize up, but even for all the training he had undergone through ANBU, He could not completely keep down his reaction at that man's name. He had tensed like an academy student who had been put through only the basics. It wasn't even subtle. I see. Asuma took another long drag of his cigarette, though this time his gaze was contemplative. I didn't realize that you would see that boy as the jailer of the Kyuubi first, and the Yandame's legacy second. Or is it perhaps, he reminds you too much of the Yandame? It was an open secret amongst the high-ranked shinobi who Uzumaki Naruto really was. People like Danzo, the Sandame, and clan heads were all aware of the boy's heritage. People who were especially close to the Hokages also knew, so long as they could be trusted to keep a secret. Asuma had apparently been lucky enough to be privy to the information as the Sandame's son, even if the brown-haired Chunin was not directly the Hokage's heir. That privilege belonged to Sarutobi Hikari and her unborn child. Asuma sighed, his eyes glittering like he knew, when he really didn't. Just a piece of advice. Don't avoid the boy just because he gives you too much bad memories. Kakashi's single eye flashed, hostile despite himself. The other Nin, barely an acquaintance at best, had no right to try and right his life. What would you know? Asuma looked away, only affording Kakashi a look at his profile. And then, he smiled, and it was a painful, heartbreaking smile, because, Kakashi, you are quite possibly the only one he has left. And trust me, no boy wants to be left alone. The words jolted his heart. Although Kakashi was by no means a sympathetic person, it had been overly callous of him to forget the story with Asuma. He looked down, ashamed in spite of himself. I'm sorry. Asuma waved a hand dismissively, although that sad look in his eyes had not disappeared. No problem, no problem. Just give the kid a chance, alright? If not for yourself, then for me. I know we're not exactly friends, but we're comrades, right? Kakashi swallowed, feeling his left eye burn with the statement. Those that break the rules and regulations are scum. But those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum. He closed his eyes and nodded, very well. I will give it a shot. The day after next, Kakashi did not avoid Naruto when he tried to come up to the silver-haired Nin. As he was buying his produce, he simply waved for the little blonde to wait as he finished his purchases. Out of the corner of his eye he noticed the 3-year-old fidget uncontrollably, no doubt wondering what had made Kakashi finally give up running away. It was what Kakashi at that age would have questioned. What do you want? Kakashi asked bluntly as he gave the last of his money to the vendor, and turned around to face the smaller blonde. There was no denying that the 3-year-old had been following him deliberately. The child shuffled his feet, and then took a breath, turning wide blue eyes upwards to meet Kakashi's. The silver-haired teen couldn't help but suck in a breath, because despite knowing who Naruto was, he still hadn't expected the boy to resemble his sensei so much. You look lonely, Naruto said, his tongue rolling at the last word as if testing it out. He took a deep breath, and stuck out his hand. Let's be friends. Kakashi blinked, and blinked again. The statement and the delivery had been so ridiculous that for a moment, he could not respond. Of all things, how could that be the reason? He thought about saying no, because he didn't need any friends. More than that, maybe he didn't want any friends. He didn't want to experience the sensation of loss again, because he was unsure of how he could handle it. But looking into those wide blue eyes that resembled Minato-sensei so much, looking at that wide grin that reminded him of Obito, how could Kakashi say no? Almost against his desire, his body moved forwards, crouching low as he took Naruto's outstretched hand into his own, and giving it a firm shake. Alright, let's, Hokage. And 11 months, streets of Konoha. The Sandame had come to visit. Naruto was really excited. It was not that he ever got bored of his daddy, but sometimes it was nice to have somebody who he would hug him and carry him. Daddy had explained that he could not be there for very serious reasons, but Naruto didn't really understand them. Naruto did wonder if everybody's daddies were invisible like his, and that was why he never saw any daddies in the orphanage. He also wondered why nobody talked about it then, if they all knew about the hidden daddies. Sorry I haven't been coming around recently, Naruto. The Sandame smiled as he walked down the street, holding Naruto's palm in his grasp, their arms swinging together with every step. Naruto found that he liked the feeling. He'd seen pictures of families doing this like this, and he liked feeling like a family. Okay, Naruto replied, smiling toothily up at the older man, you bring toys. The words didn't sound quite right, because in truth, the Sandame brought much more than that, but Naruto didn't know how to put it into phrases. But Daddy said that the Sandame was smart, so Naruto thought that maybe the Sandame already knew anyway. The Sandame's eyes crinkled as he smiled, and Naruto beamed up at him. I heard you've been going out all by yourself now, is that true? The Sandame asked with a twinkle in his eyes and a gentle smile on his face. Naruto nodded happily in response, puffing up his chest in pride. Yeah. I'm a big boy now, the Hokage chuckled lightly, before continuing on with the round of conversation. And if I may ask, how did you get out here? Naruto's face screwed up in thought. He didn't really like lying, because he had read that lying was bad, but Daddy said that sometimes lying was okay too, and Naruto believed in his daddy. I heard some nurses talking about it, and I wanted to see. I'm really tall now, see? I can ebb and reach the doorknob. The Sandame nodded his great head. I see. And the gates? You are very tall, Naruchan, but Naruto threw his hands up in the air. Seals. They do stuff. I read about them, and wanted to Taui and Den whoosh. He really was excited. It was really neat to see his little piece of paper make the gate easy to move. He hadn't liked drawing it, but with Daddy giving always talking to him, he had gotten through. The Sandaime let out another chuckle, and for a moment, looked a little like Kakashi Nizan, but that was weird, because Kakashi Nizan wasn't old, and the Sandaime was very old. Naruto blinked, and then the resemblance was gone, and Naruto thought he probably just imagined it. Getting into seals, are we? The Sandaime said, a funny tone in his voice. I see. That's good to know, Naruto. Naruto didn't get it, but good was good. He closed his eyes and smiled. The Sandaime led him to a place that sold food. The stand owner greeted them pleasantly before hurrying to go get their meals. What were we eating? Naruto asked, only barely reaching the table with 5 sets of cushions stacked under him. He was excited. The orphanage never let them choose what they ate. Sushi, the Sandaime replied with a smile, breaking apart Naruto's chopsticks for him and setting them down on his napkin. It's not native to Fire Nation, but it's still something that we enjoy. Oh, truthfully, he didn't get it, but he wanted to appear smart to the Sandaime. He heard that the Sandaime was really smart, and Naruto wanted to continue standing out to the Hokage. The almost 4-year-old made a note to ask Daddy about sushi later, and what native meant. Daddy never talked when other people were talking to Naruto, which the boy thought was rather silly, but Daddy said it was important. So, the Sandaime posed good-naturedly, what else has been going on in your life, Naruto? Anything interesting? Naruto stopped squirming and trying to fix his seat by beaming brilliantly at the Sandaime. Yeah. I met my Nai-san. Kakanizan. He's really cool. The Sandaime chuckled. Is that so? Yeah. He talks to me and smiles at me, but he didn't hug, and he doesn't stare at me with those cold eyes. At the last phrase, his voice had trailed off. The Sandaime gave him a look full of sorrow, but Naruto didn't care about that. A thought had struck him, and it made him quiet. Hey, Gigi, Naruto asked softly, swinging his legs listlessly underneath him. Can I ask you something? Sure, Naruto, the Sandaime replied, his voice equally as soft. Ask anything you want. I can't promise that I'll answer, but there's never anything wrong with asking. The stores, Dairy. Naruto struggled to find the words, and shifted his head towards a villager who had just passed one of his strawberry crates to a buyer. Dairy, not cold when I'm with you. Day looked different. For a moment, the Sandaime looked surprised, but then he quickly recovered. Ah, he said quietly, his voice sad. Naruto knew the emotion because Daddy often sounded sad too, even if Daddy never admitted it. Ah, well, you see, I suppose that emotion that you see is love. Naruto pursed his lips. He knew what love was, of course. He was a big boy. His daddy loved him, and the storybook mummies always loved their babies. And if that look that was directed at the Sandaime was love, then they really love you, Naruto said in nearly a whisper. The Sandaime looked thoughtful for a moment, and then he patted Naruto's head. He smiled brightly, though there was something strained about that too. That's probably because I'm the Hokage. Hokage? Naruto repeated, not really understanding. His daddy had explained that it was the position of the village leader, and that it was what the Sandaime was, but never anything more than that. Yes, the Hokage. It's my duty to protect the village, no matter what the cost. And I suppose the villagers are trying to repay that by being extra nice. Oh, he wasn't sure what no matter what the cost really meant, but he did understand the extra nice part. He hated how the villagers looked at him, he really did. Daddy said hate was a strong word, but Naruto was sure he wasn't wrong about this one. Naruto perked up, suddenly breaking out of his slouch as he gave the Sandaime one long, accessing look. He wanted that love, wanted it more than anything. Sometimes he found that he did not mind because his daddy was with him, but there were other times when he could not help but mind. He wanted the cold stares to go away. The Sandaime blinked down at the little blonde in surprise. Naruto? Naruto took a deep breath, and then nodded up at the village leader. A bright smile split his face, and his blue eyes sparkling with determination. You know I will earn that title of Hokage, ninja game, and 1 month, Naruto's room. Minato did not know what to do. Ever since that meeting with the Sandaime 2 months ago, Naruto had been enraptured by the idea of being Hokage. He did not quite shout it out to the world, but whenever he was feeling particularly happy, he would giggle to himself that he would be Hokage one day. It was the same whenever Naruto was feeling sad, except that the giggles would not be present, only a quiet, burning sort of determination. Minato had known that Naruto did not know what it meant. He was only 4 after all, with them having celebrated Naruto's birthday 1 month ago. To be honest, he did not want Naruto to be Hokage, no matter how selfish it seemed. He had been shocked beyond belief when Naruto had first uttered the words, for a moment unable to say anything because of the mixture of horror and memories that had assaulted him. He remembered a similar child, a female with red hair, boldly declaring that she would take the title of village leader even when it was not clear that she had the ability. He had remembered the smell of blood and decaying flesh, the tragedy that came with poorly made decisions. Minato admitted that he did believe that his son could become Hokage, but he did not want that life for his child. It would be constant headache and heartache, and although gratifying, it would also be painful. To be Hokage was to live a life beyond the existence of oneself. It was to live a life for the village. Minato had not been unhappy during his term, but he had also known that he might have been happier as a regular shinobi. Minato had even revealed that all Hokage were shinobi in hopes of discouraging his boy. Unfortunately, that had backfired spectacularly. When he told Naruto that all Hokages were trained warriors, and not just any warriors, but the best, he had expected his son to pout and back off because of all the hard work involved. He should have known better. Naruto had instead squealed about how cool it was, and had gotten more fire than ever to become the village leader. He had bugged Minato for stories about what Hokages did, and Minato had not been able to refuse. With every passing tale, Naruto became more and more enamored with the idea. What had started out as perhaps a passing fancy had turned into something more. When Naruto revealed his true reasons for wanting the position that night a month and a half ago, Minato's heart had nearly bled out from sorrow. There were other ways of earning acknowledgement, and Minato had explained it to his son. But by that time Naruto had already become dead set on earning the title of Hokage, and there was little Minato could do to deter him. It was so stupid. What Minato had sealed within Naruto ensured that Naruto could not have any life but that of a shinobi's, and yet strangely, Minato was feeling hesitant about teaching Naruto the ninja ways. But it was Naruto's heritage, and Minato could not stop that. How long do I have to keep doing this? Naruto complained, puffing out his cheeks in slight irritation and consequently drawing Minato out of his thoughts. They were in the academy forest again, resting against a tree as Naruto tried vainly to concentrate enough chakra to blow off the leaf on his forehead. After finding out that people did not become shinobi by simply declaring it, Naruto had quietly asked for his daddy to help him, and Minato had not been able to refuse. For the past month Minato had begun incorporating a training regime for Naruto outside of games. It was not insanely difficult by any means, but it was somewhat taxing. He had hoped to get Naruto off the idea of being a shinobi so early, but Naruto had stuck through it valiantly. They were currently on the leaf-blowing exercise as far as chakra went, amongst various other physical activities. Until you can blow the leaf off your forehead 10 times out of 10, Minato replied with a gentle smile, sending an affectionate picture to his son. He knew he was being unreasonable, but he wanted his baby to be the best. If his son was dead set on starting shinobi training so early, then the least Minato could do was to make sure that he wouldn't get killed early. I've already explained this to you, Naruto. I can't teach you anything else chakra-related until you can do this. Naruto sighed, pouting lightly as he adjusted the leaf's position. Okay. The little blonde had gotten really excited for jutsus. When Naruto had not initially understood what they were, Minato had sent him some images of people performing some basic, C-level jutsus. And then, caught up in the moment, he might have shown some higher-ranked ones that simply looked impressive. Ever since then, Naruto had been obsessed with wanting to learn jutsus, despite the fact that he was far too young for them. Minato had tried to explain as much, but Naruto had just tuned him out. In the end, Minato had decided that this may be a perfect opportunity for Naruto to learn chakra control. After all, Naruto was the jailer of the Kyuubi, and as such, would likely have more trouble with the concept than any others his age. But Minato added, not just for the sake of it, if you're tired, we should probably stop for the day. Naruto paused for a moment, looking as if he were seriously considering it, and then he shook his head. The leaf lost its position and fluttered to the ground, but neither of them paid it any attention. Nah. I'm still good. But, can we play firefighter afterwards? Minato chuckled at the reply. Even if he was unsure about the source, it was nice to see that his child had such dedication. However, his child still hadn't lost the playful innocence that Minato wanted to keep in him. Yes, of course, Naruto. Firefighter will be fun, big brother. And 2 months, Konoha Orphanage Gates. Kakashi was nervous. He wasn't sure what had prompted him to, but somehow he had found himself promising to spend an entire day with Naruto. It had happened so very quickly. One moment Naruto was crying over something the villagers had said to him, and the next moment the silver-haired teen found himself in this predicament. He had no idea what to do. It was one thing dropping in on Naruto every once in a while to give him a stiff greeting. That did not require him to gaze too much upon the face that so closely resembled Minato-sensei's face that he could practically feel his heart being wrenched open. It fulfilled his obligations to the impulsive promise he had made to the smaller blonde without forcing him to take a step he knew he'd never be ready for. He met Naruto at the orphanage gates. The little boy was waiting by himself, leaned up against the old outpost. Every once in a while a shiver reeked his body, for the stages of winter were coming, and while Fire Country was spared most of the harshness of the season, it was still colder than usual outside. Naruto, Kakashi asked as he floated down to meet the young boy at the gates. He'd been jumping on trees previously, and had even seen a ruffle of dark-colored clothing that hinted towards the A&B recruit who had been assigned to guard the Jinchuriki of Konoha. Naruto, who seemed to be an observant type of person by nature, surprisingly didn't seem to notice him until Kakashi had landed. The blonde startled, but recovered just as quickly, sending up a bright smile to the older shinobi. Kakashi strode forward, frowning as he leaned down and tightened Naruto's collar. The blonde was wearing nothing but a shirt and shorts, which was abysmally inadequate. Are you trying to catch a cold? These clothes aren't enough to keep you warm. Don't really have other clothes, Naruto said with a shrug, an expression on his face that ill-suited him. But then his eyes brightened and the moment passed. Well, I do have this coat thingy that the Sandane bought me for my birthday, but it's too big and heavy and I didn't want it to slow us down. Some people thought I was being silly, but I'm not, am I? We're going to be doing lots of fun things that don't need a big fat coat slowing us down, right? Naruto was looking at him with wide earnest eyes, the most beseechingly pleading expression on his face. Kakashi pinched the bridge of his nose. Where are your guardians? That seemed to shut Naruto down. Confusion flashed across those wide blue eyes, replacing the earnestness. Huh? The people at the orphanage who take care of you, Kakashi clarified. You know the ladies who take you out to play and stuff. Oh. Finally Naruto seemed to understand, and his reaction was about what Kakashi expected. His face fell. Children never liked to be reminded that somebody was in charge of them after all. Don't got any of those. Ah, I see, Kakashi nodded, only to pause as he ran the words through his mind again. Wait, what? I don't really have a guardian from the orphanage, Naruto said hesitantly, ducking his head and shifting his feet as if he were the one who was guilty. I mean, I know what those are, because the other kids have them, but I guess no one likes me enough to I guess I haven't really earned their respect yet. I get that. And then his head snapped up, his eyes insistent, but I do have other guardians. Inbyu-san up in that tree over there looks out for me all the time. Kakashi felt too much to even take note of the fact that a 4-year-old had just identified a shinobi who had probably spent years training in stealth so that even Kages might have trouble finding him. He felt his fists clench at his sides. Was Naruto saying that none of the orphanage patrons looked after him? And then, as quickly as the stab of fury had hit, it dissipated, leaving only shock in its wake. Anger was not an emotion that he'd felt for a long time. Or maybe it was more accurate to say that he was in a constant state of smothering rage. Either way, this spike of emotion was unusual, and that was worrisome. What if he felt such impulses during a mission? He'd overheard the higher-ups talking, and he knew that it was only a matter of time before he was promoted to an ANBU captain. He did not care much for the promotion itself, but he knew what the responsibility meant. He'd learned it all those years ago with that disastrous mission on the border of IWA which had taken from him half of everything. He could not afford to have emotional outbursts and possibly jeopardize his teammates. Never again. You should still wear a coat, Kakashi said dully, because what else could he say? He could not get mad at the civilians for simply displaying human nature, otherwise you'll catch a cold. I'm practicing circulating chakra, Naruto chirped brightly. It's supposed to help with keeping warm, you know. Kakashi blinked, and blinked again, snapped out of his bitter thoughts. But Naruto just kept smiling, as if it wasn't completely ridiculous for a 4-year-old to be able to manipulate chakra in a way that some chunin had trouble with. Not for the first time, Kakashi felt his image of Naruto splinter. Despite the fact that Naruto had Obito's smile, Naruto was not his friend. Obito had been well-wishing and energetic, and Kakashi wished that he had learned to appreciate it sooner, but he was not in any way intelligent in the conventional sense. Naruto, on the other hand, could very well be another prodigy in the making. That's great, Naruto, Kakashi said, trying his best to swallow the lump in his throat. He had no idea how to feel about this, so he did what he did best. Run away. Let's get moving, shall we? Naruto said happily, taking a step forward and showing that he was ready to go. But where are we going? A movie, Kakashi muttered, hesitating for just the smallest of moments before taking Naruto's hand. While he never quite understood why Minato-sensei and Obito and Rin had always insisted on contact, he did have to admit that it would be easier guiding a small 4-year-old along if they held hands. Naruto's beaming face made Kakashi nearly drop his hand, but the silver-haired Jounin was one of the most feared shinobi of Fire Nation for the Shodame's sake, and he wasn't going to let a 4-year-old scare him off. They walked towards the village proper at a sedate pace. Naruto was chattering about squirrels and chairs and knights, and Kakashi had no idea how those things even related, so he allowed his thoughts to drift. Not for the first time, Kakashi wondered if this was such a good idea after all. When he'd first realized the implications of promising to spend a day with Naruto, that it would mean he would have to find some way to entertain a 4-year-old, the movie had been the first thing to pop into mind. There wasn't a lot he'd done in his childhood other than train, and he did even less now. There was one activity, however, that he did remember with some degree of fondness, and honestly, it was the only thing he could think of that was appropriate for Naruto. Whenever Team Minato had completed a C-rank or above mission and weren't given another one immediately afterwards, Sensei had always taken them out to watch the newest movie in the series that they'd followed ever since it had first came out. Kakashi had always pretended that he didn't like it, because it wasn't training and he couldn't help but guiltily feel that he was wasting time every time he went to go see it, but secretly, he was in awe of the kunoichi who never gave up. It was only after the 4th Hokage's death that Kakashi realized that his sensei must have known, and that was why he kept bringing Team Minato to the theaters. Here we are, he muttered when they finally arrived, and Naruto stopped mid-sentence to gaze wide-eyed up at the all-encompassing billboards. There, atop the entrance for Konoha's movie theater was a colorful picture of a woman facing east, her face determined as the sun set behind her. Also behind her were three men wearing various costumes of old, their gazes adoring and steadfast in their loyalty. He'd never understand why Princess Fune was as popular as she was, because other than her character the story was a disaster, but he did have to admit that she was useful for this one time. It was a different actress from when Kakashi had watched it with Team Minato, and it was just as well, because he didn't think he could handle going in otherwise. Wow, Naruto breathed, this looks so awesome. Wow wow wow. This is the best day ever, Kakashi and I-san. Kakashi had to shake his head to clear the image that had superimposed upon the blonde child. It was one of Obito, dancing around with Rin as he blathered about how happy he was when he'd heard the plans for the day. And didn't he know that everything could be ruined in just a split second of time, when you come home happy like a fool because you'd done so well on your worthless taijutsu match and wanted to show your daddy only to find his body hanging in the rafters? Didn't he know that anything could happen, like the image of your invincible father being shattered because you realized that he could and would abandon you just so that he wouldn't have to deal with his own pain? Don't be an idiot, Kakashi said with a hint of frustration. The day hasn't even started yet. Naruto shot him a hurt look, and Kakashi realized he had slipped. Sorry, he muttered, giving Naruto's hand a gentle squeeze. Let's just get inside, alright? True to form, Naruto didn't stay down for long. He'd never been in a movie theater before, and he immediately began crawling around, touching everything with an amazed expression and babbling about everything he could see. Feeling guilty, this time Kakashi did listen, even if nothing really made sense. It's like he's an octopus, Naruto squealed, hiding his face in laughter. Kakashi shot his young charge a confused look. What? It's like, he was waving his arms and those papery thingies were waving out behind him, and he kinda looked like an octopus. No, I understand that. I just don't get why it's funny. Naruto shot him a look like he was the dumbest person on the planet. Kakashi didn't know whether to be amused or frustrated about that, because whatever else he was, it could be agreed that Hatake Kakashi was not stupid. Still, he did have to admit that it was refreshing to have someone who didn't think that he already knew all the answers. Finally the movie started, and it was with no small amount of relief that Kakashi settled Naruto down. They were getting glares from some of the others who had come in to watch the latest in the Princess Fune series, but Naruto didn't seem to notice those, so Kakashi also took no particular interest. The opening credits began rolling, and Naruto wouldn't stop whispering about how cool everything was. Kakashi, who never really cared much if other people were being inconvenienced, didn't bother to shush him. When the actual film began playing though, Naruto fell dead silent. Kakashi chanced to look at the blonde only to find the 4-year-old staring wide-eyed at the screen, utterly entranced by the story playing out. Following the smaller blonde's gaze, Kakashi allowed himself to relax and to also enjoy the movie. The plot was as predictable as always. The princess's group came across some people who wanted help and presumed, therefore, that they needed it. Plans were made, betrayals happened, and a last battle of course was conducted. It was all very mundane, and yet, as long as I live, I will turn everything I have into strength and I will show that I can cut a way open. And yet Kakashi couldn't help but be reminded of Minato, of Rin, and especially of Obito. Those three had never given up, had they? Even when their lives were at an end, even when the fearful clutches of death were reaching out towards them, they were still able to joke and to dream about the future. Kakashi choked on his breath. He couldn't do this after all. He couldn't. He wanted to shut down, to bury everything that was not logic and calculation because he didn't want to couldn't feel something like this without going insa. What's the matter? Naruto's voice broke through his thoughts, through the silence that had somehow descended upon him. The tone was curious but concerned, and just low enough that nobody around them could hear. Kakashi closed his eyes. It was then that he detected the faint wetness behind his eyes, and how two thin trails of damp coolness were trailing down his cheeks. He realized that he was crying. He turned to look at the one he had chosen to take with him to this movie, and for the first time, Kakashi was able to see the boy beyond the two great shadows of his teacher and his best friend. And now he remembered why he had enjoyed these movies so much. It wasn't Fune or even the movie itself, it was the setting. The memories were not ones of the negative kind, and he really had no right to make this about him and what he'd lost, did he? He'd been awed by the princess, yes, but there was a small secret part of him that simply enjoyed spending time with his team. They had fun here. He'd never say it, but they had formed a pseudo-family around him, and it was here at the movies that he felt that the most, with Rin and Obito pressed up against him and Minato-sensei overlooking them all. I'm fine, he said with a weak smile. It was the first smile he'd given in years, and it was shaky yet, but he felt as if Naruto deserved one. Reaching out a hand, Kakashi grasped Naruto's little digits within his own and gave it a gentle squeeze. He wasn't completely cured yet, of that he knew very well, but this was a start. Minato's and Obito's ghosts were still very much present, but for the first time in a long time, he felt that he looked beyond them. And what he had found was humbling. His voice was soft as it echoed through the emptying theater, but no one could mistake the sincerity. Thank you for accompanying me today, Naruto. The little ramen shop, and 4 months, 3rd district of Konoha. Nakano Tuchi was only the humble owner of a ramen stand, but even he knew right from wrong. He knew that the way that the rest of the villagers were treating the newest drifter of the Konoha markets was far from kind. The little 4-year-old was plodding along the streets, his strides hesitant as he passed by various restaurants and vendors. Tucci had seen the boy around often enough to know that the blonde was not lost in the most literal sense. He was sure that the child knew exactly where to head for any certain purpose, and yet the boy still acted as if he had no idea where to go. Tucci knew the reason for it. Everywhere he went, the restaurant owners and stand managers would treat him with a look of unease. Sometimes even a glare. The child seemed unusually perceptive to such things, and it seemed to make the boy doubt himself. Nobody wanted him in their area, and that made it hard for the boy to choose any which place to go. It was not that Tucci did not understand his colleagues. Not only had the Kyuubi taken away their yandame, but it had also taken away Uzumaki Kushina, who had proved herself as a kunoichi of Konoha. The villagers had trusted her to deal with the beast and to keep it from harming them, but that was not the case with the 4-year-old. It was not really the fact that the blonde boy was a Jinchuriki that bothered them, but rather, he was a Jinchuriki with unknown skills. The villagers could not trust a little boy to keep a hold of the demon when even the red-hot habanero had lost control. In the end, nobody truly wished to harm a child, but the subconscious had always taken self-preservation more seriously than some moral code. The only reason that Tucci did not share the same terseness as the rest of the village was, perhaps, only because of what he knew. Tucci eyed the blonde. For him, the connection was obvious, but then again, nobody had frequented his ramen stand more than the Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina in the year before they had died. Theirs was a relationship that had never been publicly announced, but when Tucci saw the new Kyuubi Jinchuriki, all his doubts about his suspicions were overturned. Sometimes he was tempted to say something, but as a ramen stand owner where shinobi frequented to discuss things that no civilian should hear, Tucci had learned the art of keeping silent. He realized that there were forces at work that he knew nothing about, and carelessly revealing something that he did know might lead to disasters he could have never foreseen. Living as long as he had in a village of shinobi, he had learned that much. Nevertheless, he felt sorrow for his two greatest customers. They were mother and father, yet they would never get the chance to see their beloved son grow up. They would never be there to help their child. Above all else, Tucci wanted his daughter to be happy, to be prosperous. He wanted to give her the best life possible, as was wont of all parents, and he did not want to confine her to a ramen stand. Tucci did not think that there was anything wrong with working at a ramen stand, of course, but should I ever want anything more in life, he wanted it to be available to her. He wanted to send her to school, an experience he had never been fortunate enough to receive. Kushina and Minato would never get that experience. Tucci almost felt as if he owed his two greatest customers something, as a parent to parent, rather than as shopkeeper to customer. So, when the small blonde chose his ramen stand next, Tucci did not turn him away. He welcomed the boy with open arms, and even when the rest of the villagers threw him wary glances, he did not regret his decision because of the wonder that filled those bright blue eyes. Drawing days and 7 months, 2nd district of Konoha. No, Naruto, not quite like that. That line goes slightly more to the left. His tongue poking out of the corner of his mouth, Naruto adjusted the line he had been drawing, moving it exactly as Minato had pointed out to him. Minato beamed in pride. Yes, just like that, Naruto-chan. The small blonde was sitting at a small table at the ice cream parlor, his legs swinging underneath him because the chair was too high. Sheets of paper were spread out before him on the table, various patterns and designs scrawled onto their surfaces. A single, worn-looking bag hung from the edge of the chair, swaying every few seconds as the wind blew past. The owner of the space had ignored them for the most part, since Naruto wasn't really causing any trouble. Instead, all his attention was focused on the sheets of paper he had liberated from the Konoha orphanage storage rooms. He was drawing, or, more accurately, creating seals. In the end, Naruto was an Uzumaki, and Minato had decided that if Naruto were to learn the shinobi arts, then the first thing he should learn was sealing. As of now, his Naruto-chan still didn't seem to have all the fine motor skills required to create perfect seals, but Minato thought he could start Naruto on recognizing them. So, although the seals that Naruto drew up now would have no real applications, they greatly helped him in understanding and remembering them. Can I take a break? Naruto asked quietly as he finished up the seal, letting out a wide yawn which almost made his face disappear. Minato smiled. The truth of the matter was, Naruto found sealing very boring, and had actually fought Minato the first time the elder blonde had suggested teaching it to him. Still, it was the Uzumaki birthright, and one more thing that would connect Naruto to his mother, and Minato could not deny that. His son was free to become a bridge builder if he so desired, but Naruto becoming a master in sealing was something that Minato would not budge on. Thankfully, all it took was a few carefully placed words about how Hokages would know the basics to sealing, and a few given images of what sealing could do that convinced Naruto the art might just be worth it. It didn't mean that a 4-year-old boy could stand it most of the time, though. Sure, Naruto, Minato said softly, because he did believe that they had done enough for the day. What would you like to do now? Naruto shook his head to indicate that he didn't know, but did look around with wide blue eyes for anything that might catch his attention. Unfortunately, there was nothing out of the usual, only the regular bustle of Konoha and the occasional tourist taking photos. The tiny blonde frowned, leaning his chin against the table and puffing out his cheeks. There truly wasn't a lot they could do while they were outside. Many of the games Minato and Naruto played required space for themselves, and Naruto was embarrassed to do the motions in front of the villagers of Konoha. He had gotten dirty looks the last time he had done it, more so than usual, and that made Naruto shy of being too loud in public. "Hey, I know," Minato said as a sudden idea hit him. His best games usually appeared in such a manner, as did his flashes of brilliance for new seal constructs. He always had half-formed ideas and thoughts floating around in his head, and when they were ready to be born into the outside world, they connected themselves automatically. Naruto perked up, having become used to Minato's unexpected inspirations and knowing what they meant. "Do you want to be a detective for today?" Minato asked mischievously, winking at his child even though he knew Naruto couldn't see it. Naruto's eyes grew wide as he sat up in awe like Detective Mouse. Minato nodded seriously. "Yes, Naruto, exactly like Detective Mouse, except even better, maybe." Naruto squirmed in his seat, looking anxiously around. "But there are no mysteries." "Sure there are, Naruto. You see that lady who just walked by? What can you tell me about her?" Naruto squinted. Minato sent him an image of the lady he was thinking of, and with a "oh," Naruto followed her with his eyes. She was a tall, graceful woman who wore a long cotton dress. Her clothing still had some sheen to them. Silver dangled from her neck and peeked through the veil of her long dark hair as she moved, reflecting the late afternoon sun. Occasionally she stopped and greeted some others on the streets, despite the fact that she was carrying multiple bags that were full to the brim. Naruto watched until she disappeared from sight, eyes wide as he tried to collect all the information that he could. Minato coughed, and decided that he should give an example first. "Alright, now listen closely. That lady is a woman of middle class who recently became involved with a man of higher social standing. You can tell because the type of fabric she wears is inexpensive but not worn out, meaning that she can afford different types of clothing. However, the necklace and earrings she had were pure silver, which means that somebody wealthy got them for her. The only type of person whom a woman would accept such expensive gifts from is a beau. She was carrying bags of groceries, meaning that she had just gone shopping. More than that, the contents of her bags were quite full, meaning that she likely only shops once a week, or so rather than a little every day. She is a person who likes to do things conveniently. This is exemplified by her clothing, which is a set that is opportune for moving around in. However, the clothing is of average style, meaning that this woman has no wish to stand out and would be perfectly content being a normal housewife. She held herself very well, which shows that she's confident in herself. Her shoulders were thrown back, and her chin was tilted up. She also showed no signs of paranoia, such as a constant shifting of the eyes, which shows that she feels very safe within the village. She is goal-oriented, because she did not look around the street for things other than her destination, and the only time she greeted someone was when they were in her path or when they had greeted her first. She's also a very strong woman, probably having experienced some hardships growing up. I would say that she's the firstborn child of her family. She did not ask for anybody's help despite her heavy bags, even though she stopped and greeted a few of the people on the street. That also shows that she is social, since despite the fact that she has heavy bags, she still makes time for other people. If you ask around, you will probably find that this lady is very well liked, and the opinion of her is generally good. Minato paused, wondering if he had dumped too much information on Naruto all at once. Naruto's eyes had turned a little glassy. Minato decided that it was enough for now, even if he had only made surface observations. After all, Naruto hadn't quite learned how to read body language yet, let the slight tension to the woman's neck muscles which bespoke of personal problems she was probably ignoring. "So Naruto, want to try?" Minato asked gently. Naruto's eyes regained his focus, and he nodded enthusiastically. "Okay, great." Minato smiled. "Now Naruto, remember that these are all assumptions, and you should never think that all your assumptions are correct, but they are good observations to make nonetheless. However, don't forget to revise your profile every time you find a new fact, alright?" There was a pause as Naruto mulled over his words, and then he gave another, slower nod to show that he understood. "Like if she said dat there was a daddy, den there's no beau?" Minato smiled faintly. He hadn't quite explained to Naruto yet that even if a woman had a husband, that didn't necessarily mean that there couldn't be a lover. Still, Naruto did not need to know that at this stage of life. "That's exactly right, Naruto. Okay. I got's it. Great Naruto." Minato beamed. Really, his Naruto was so smart. "Okay, what can you tell me about that man over there?" He sent the appropriate picture. It was a man in his mid-40s, with a big, blustering figure and a merry smile on his face as he talked to one of the vendors. He was leaning across the front of the stall, slapping the vendor's arm every once in a while. The vendor himself was talking amiably, but throwing an annoyed glance at the man's hand every time it left the man's vicinity. The man also wore regular cotton, though his was stained with dirt and had the look of being washed many times. His hair was cropped short, and he spoke with an accent that bespoke of poor education. Nevertheless, he was happy enough. Naruto made a noise of concentration as he squinted, and then he gave a decisive nod. Minato took this as his cue that Naruto was done. He had gathered as much as he could about the man, and now it was Naruto's turn to show off. What did you see, Naruto-chan? He's big, Naruto replied. That means, he probably eats a lot. His clothes are, normal, so he's not a lord or something. He's smiling, which means that he's happy, but he hits his friend a lot, and they don't look like they're training, which means that he's not very nice. Minato couldn't help it, he laughed. Naruto frowned slightly. Sorry, Minato said, barely holding down his chuckles. While it wasn't quite what he was expecting, he couldn't say that it was wrong. Besides, this was Naruto's first time doing this type of thing. You're completely right, Naruto-chan. Good job. I'm proud of you. Naruto beamed at the praise. He looked around some more, practically bouncing in his seat in his excitement. Next one. Minato smiled softly, and gave the next person whom Naruto was to observe to his boy. First though, he told Naruto everything that he had seen. They went about the game for an hour, with Naruto improving slowly but surely every single time. By the end of it, Naruto's throat was going dry, and Minato decided that it was time to end the game. Naruto's excitement dissolved, and he looked back at his pencil and papers forlornly. He evidently didn't want to go back to sealing. Minato could only shake his head. He didn't quite understand how his and Kushina's son could dislike sealing, but maybe it was just the fact that Naruto couldn't do anything cool with it yet. Minato could definitely see Kushina blowing a casket at learning the basics. He decided that Naruto could use a break. Although technically the detective game had been a break from sealing, it was also quite a learning experience, even if Naruto didn't realize it. Naruto could use some time for real, wasteful fun. How about you just draw for a bit, Minato said gently. You haven't done that for a while. Besides, it might help with Naruto's motor skills. Although Minato had been teaching Naruto the basic seals, which Naruto could remember well enough, Naruto still couldn't quite illustrate them down well enough for them to work. Naruto's face instantly cleared up as he picked up his pencil enthusiastically and got to work. Okay, Minato chuckled, and turned his attention away. Although Naruto's attention was focused solely on his drawing now, Minato could still spot people from Naruto's peripheral. He had long mastered dividing his and Naruto's attention. Now that he wasn't focused on what he might teach Naruto, Minato couldn't help but allow the hour of the detective game get to him. It had been a while since he had consciously observed people like that. In the orphanage, Naruto hadn't gotten to see many people, so Minato's skill in that area had diminished. However, he hadn't noticed how much until he had consciously been trying to find things about people today and had noticed many things that he hadn't noticed subconsciously. Before he had sealed himself within Naruto, he would have noticed all the things that he said and thought today without even thinking about it. It would have just been in the back of his mind, only brought up again when he needed the information. Now it seemed as if that skill had been lost in his years of isolation with Naruto. Still, even as he spoke, he had felt the skill coming back to him, and it was only now that Minato realized how useful it would be to be able to do that again. While he personally couldn't make use of it, perhaps he could use it to help Naruto find friends, and later, avoid enemies. So, while Naruto drew, Minato focused on the people passing, trying valiantly to figure out everything he could about them before they disappeared from his sight. That is, until Naruto's excited voice drew him out of his thoughts. Look! Naruto cried, throwing down his pencil and pointing one stubby finger at the picture he had been working on. Look what I drew! Minato refocused on Naruto, and smiled at the picture. Ah, that's an excellent lion, Naruto. Naruto's smile drooped. It's not a lion. Oh, he had been sure he had gotten it right. Naruto had drawn a lion the last time, after all. Tiger? No. Elephant? He supposed that those squiggles over there could be a tail, and those triangles did look awfully like ears. No. Centipede? Perhaps the triangles weren't ears, but rather eyes. The lines that he had assumed to connect to make 4 legs could very well be multiple legs which had unfortunately gotten entangled. No. Minato struggled to think of another animal that might resemble Naruto's figure on the paper. He was drawing a blank. Yo! Kakashi said cheerily as he seemingly popped out of nowhere. He leaned over the side of Naruto's table. His eye was curved upwards into that upside-down view again. He glanced at Naruto's drawing. Ah, that's a nice squirrel, Naruto-chan. Naruto's face twitched, and then scrunched, and then the most horrible noise erupted from his lungs. Wah! Friends forever. And 8 months, Konoha East Side Park. Naruto fiddled with the edge of his shirt, looking out from behind his tree nervously. He took a few deep breaths, telling himself to calm down, and then, he stepped out. He couldn't be a chicken, he told himself, because Daddy wouldn't want a chicken for a son, and Kakashi Nizan would be ashamed of a coward for a brother. Naruto thought maybe the two were too nice to say it, but he didn't want to risk them not loving him anymore because he was a chicken. Today was his first day in a playground outside of the orphanage. Actually, Naruto didn't remember being in a playground before, but the flashes of sand and grass did seem familiar to him. At the orphanage, he'd always hid behind the pillars to look at the other children play. He did not know why, but he always had a dreadful feeling associated with the playground, and the orphanage grounds offered no shelter from the glares of the nurses. Gathering all the courage he could in his little body, Naruto walked as confidently as he could towards the main grounds. This playground had a set of swings and a slide, as well as a large cage thingy that had a lot of fun-looking things attached like a fire pole and a rope climb. There were kids scattered everywhere, and parents chatting amicably on the benches. Naruto took a deep breath, and looked around for any group of children who looked like they could use another playmate. His eyes passed over a pineapple attached to a boy playing tag with a bunch of others, a short and black-haired girl who was bragging loudly to a crowd of wide-eyed children, and clusters of various others who had formed groups of 2 or 3. There was one boy, however, who didn't seem to have been claimed by any of the other groups. He was chasing a dog, and had funny triangles on his face, but he looked very fun, and he might still want to play. Naruto's face brightened, and he took a step towards the boy with the dog, when suddenly, something else caught his eye. A pink-haired girl who he had assumed was having fun with 2 other girls, had started crying. She had her face in her hands, and tears leaking out from between her fingers, but the other 2 girls who were with her did not start comforting her. Instead, they were grinning maliciously. Naruto frowned. I think they're bullying her, Daddy said, speaking up for the first time since they got to the park. Sometimes, Naruto wondered if Daddy could read minds, because he always saw through Naruto's lack of understanding. That means, those 2 girls aren't being nice to the last one. Oh. Naruto's eyes widened in understanding. He knew plenty of people who weren't nice to him, and he didn't like the feeling one bit. He recalled that at those times, he had always wanted someone to notice him and to approach him, and to assure him that it was not the whole world which was against him. Boo, but they're her age. The only people who had been mean to Naruto were the really tall people and the really old people. Usually if Naruto was able to find one of the other orphans without the nurses around, they'd get to play a good game. Daddy sighed sadly. Children can be cruel as well. Remember that adults were once children too. Naruto paused for a long moment, contemplating that, and then he puffed out his chest. It's not right, Daddy hummed, but there was a smile in his voice. No, indeed it isn't, Naruto-chan. Naruto nodded to himself, and marched over to the 3 girls. They were sitting on the grass fields some distance away, but Naruto was used to running around the forest, and the walk seemed like nothing. He stopped in front of them, coughing to get their attention. The 2 girls who had been laughing with each other looked up, blinking as suddenly their territory was invaded by a blonde-haired stranger. The pink-haired girl hiccuped once and tried to stem her crying as she also looked up, a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Hey! Naruto said, crossing his pudgy little arms in front of his chest. Leave her alone. There was a moment of silence in which the 3 tried to process what exactly he was demanding. The pink-haired girl seemed to be the one to understand first, because she allowed her hands to drop from his face and smiled brilliantly at him. One of the bullies blinked and sniffed. She got up in one wobbly motion and brushed off her skirt, her nose in the air. Well, Kara-chan was ging boring anyway. Let's go, Mitha. The other girl nodded enthusiastically, and also tottered to her feet. The 2 stood there for a moment, looking as if they were waiting for something. There was a pregnant pause, and then the girls looked at each other, and one shifted guiltily. Without another word, the 2 turned and vacated the area. What was that all about? Naruto muttered to himself, adequately confused. They wanted you to invite them to play, Naruto, Daddy said gently, though there was an amused undertone in his voice. Oh. For a moment, Naruto felt a keen sense of loss. He would have loved to play. He debated running after the 2, but then a loud sniffle caught his attention, and he remembered the crying girl. He couldn't leave her alone. Whenever he cried, Daddy always tried to comfort him. And then, he felt loads better. He thought it was only fair if he tried to make other people feel loads better too. You okay? He asked the pink-haired girl, plopping down beside her. For a moment she just stared at him, and that made him feel weird, but her stare wasn't cold at all, so he thought he could deal with it. Finally, she nodded, still sniffing. Yeah? Thank yous? Naruto beamed, although he had no idea what he was being thanked for. Still, he knew his manners, and he knew exactly what to say. You're welcome. There was a pause, in which none of them really said anything. Naruto shifted, uncomfortable with the silence. He thought back to what he said, and realized that he hadn't actually done anything that Daddy usually did at all. He tried to think of what to say. Is anything wrong? Naruto finally asked, and at the girl's confused look, waved his arms empathetically. I mean, you were crying. Oh, the girl looked down, fiddling with the edge of her sundress. Nobody will play with me, so I was sad. Naruto frowned at that. He knew exactly how it felt when nobody would play with. That's alright then. I will play with you. Naruto stopped in the middle of his declaration when he realized that he didn't actually know the girl's name. How silly! He jumped up, grinning. I'm Naruto. What's your name? The girl's mouth opened and closed, and then she too bowed in greeting. Sakura. But I don't know if you'll want to play with me. Why's that? Naruto asked, curious. I've got a big forehead, Sakura said, her eyes suspiciously shiny. Wow. Naruto had read that princesses had shiny eyes, but he hadn't been able to imagine it before. You're a princess, Sakura-chan, Naruto said happily, spontaneously hugging the girl. While he hadn't actually been hugged much in his life, His daddy always gave him images of him being hugged, and besides that, he had read that hugging was what friends and family were supposed to do. Sakura stiffened in his arms. Huh? You are a princess, Naruto said to himself in amazement as he stood up again. And then, he grinned, and struck a pose, so I'll be your knight. Let's go find the super secret medicine for the queen, Princess Sakura-chan. Sakura blinked, and blinked again, and then she giggled and also stood. Can I be a magical princess who has special powers? Course, Sakura-chan, Naruto exclaimed, and our enemy will be a Mina warlock who stole all of our cookies. Oh no! Sakura gasped, looking horrified. For real, not my mum's cookies. They're the best. Yeah, so we've got to go and pick a bone with that guy, Naruto agreed, shaking his fist at seemingly nothing. With one smooth motion, he grabbed onto Sakura's hand, and started dragging her to the playground. Come on. We've got no time to waste. Even though he said that, the adventure was harsh. Monkey bars became bridges across lava pits, slides became escape tunnels, and flowers became evil fairies who were secretly working for the warlock. Naruto had never had so much fun in his life. When it was finally time to go, and Sakura's mum had come to pick her up, Naruto almost felt like crying. But Sakura-chan, Naruto complained, we didn't get to the secret medicine yet. Sakura only giggled, even as her mother dragged her away by the same hand that Naruto had held while they raced across the Konoha ravines. Then we'll get it next time, Naruto-chan. Naruto instantly brightened, and he was almost able to ignore the fact that Sakura's mother didn't seem to like him, just like none of the other mothers had liked him. Alright, Sakura-chan, see you next time. But there never was a next time, despite what Sakura had promised. When Naruto went to the park for a 10th day, and still found no sign of Sakura-chan, he knew that something was wrong. Why isn't she coming? Naruto whispered sadly. He hadn't realized he had asked it aloud, but apparently he had, because Daddy answered. His voice was beyond gentle. Hey, Naruto-chan, I'll give you permission to use some of the money Kakashi Nizen gave you, alright? Let's go get some ice cream. Naruto didn't really want ice cream. He wanted Sakura-chan back. While it had been really fun playing with the other children, it had been different with Sakura-chan. Nobody had been able to keep up with his adventures before, and she had even said that she wanted to see him again. Had that been a lie? Or had Sakura's mummy just forced her away like all the nurses did with the orphanage children? It was really unfair. He didn't know why mummies and daddies could be so mean. His daddy wasn't like that at all, and Naruto thought that they should all take some lessons from him, and that thought reminded him. Even if he did not have a friend, he did have the best daddy in the world. Alright, ice cream, Naruto chirped, turning away from the playground and skipping towards the Konoha marketplace. He wasn't really feeling alright, but his daddy was trying his best to cheer Naruto up. The little blonde was not stupid. He knew that daddy would never offer him sugar regularly, but Naruto thought that maybe, just maybe, he would be alright, because he could be for his daddy. A moment in time, and 11 months, Tuchi's ramen stand. Yakushi Kabuto was not having a good day. For all intents and purposes, he should have been having a good day since he had just recently passed the genin exams which so few were able to do, but he could not bring it in himself to be content. His teammates were both members of a clan, and while the clans were both minor ones, his teammates did not seem to get the hint and constantly lorded it over him. They also made a lot of unsavory, not so subtle comments relating to the past he had before he met the captain of the medical corps. It made him angry. Kabuto shifted on the stool that was his seat, a light frown making its way across his features as he leaned in more closely to the stand at which he was sitting. The only reason Kabuto had not lashed out at the two yet was because he knew his father would not want him to. Kabuto owed that man everything. Yakushi Genrei had taught Kabuto to be calm and patient in situations like this, and Kabuto was loath to disappoint him. Added to that, Kabuto was very much aware of the fact that Genrei had pulled a lot of strings to get Kabuto to graduate. While Konoha did not do something as wasteful as pre-choosing the candidates that were set to become shinobi, they did rig the teams so that the clan children were more likely to pass. Civilian teams still passed the genin exams every once in a while, but it was very rare and only happened when there was exceptional talent. Clan children had been raised as shinobi all their lives, and sticking 3 clan children together was a sure way to make a workable genin team. Either way, it benefited Konoha. Genrei, of course, was one of those civilian exceptions, but he had seen it fit to give Kabuto the best chances possible. Kabuto was an intelligent boy, and all of this he gathered from eavesdropping and gathering random tidbits of information. He knew that his father had done everything that he could to get Kabuto on the team that he was on now. He also knew that if Genrei hadn't done such a thing, Kabuto would have probably failed the genin exams and ended up staying back another year. It didn't make Kabuto feel any better though. He was brought out of his thoughts by the sound of a loud crash somewhere behind him, and then childish laughter which split the air. Almost automatically Kabuto turned to look, just in time to see what appeared to be a fair-haired 4-year-old laughing an apology at the street lamp he had just knocked over. With a shake of his head, Kabuto turned back to the stands, but not before catching the disgusted looks the people around had shot at the child for doing something so stupid. Naruto! The ramen stand owner called out cheerfully, and Kabuto was confused for a moment on why the cook was shouting out an ingredient to the world. And then the owner leaned over the side of his stand and Kabuto realized that it was a greeting. Tuchi-san! The blonde exclaimed back with an equal vigor, scrambling to the nearest empty stool. Unfortunately, it happened to be the one beside Kabuto's. Kabuto barely restrained a sigh. It was obvious that the stand owner and the child knew each other, and he had little wish to be caught in between what was bound to be an exuberant exchange. It was just then that the stand owner's attention turned back to Kabuto. Have you ordered yet? Kabuto shook his head. No, not yet. I was still thinking over what I wanted. This was the first time he'd ever been to a ramen stand. It was part of the reason he was here in the first place. Nobody would expect him to be here, and hence, he was less likely to be found and be forced through conversations he did not particularly desire at the moment. You should order miso, the little boy named Naruto whispered conspiratorially. It's the bestest. Kabuto's lips twitched into an amused grin. He had no idea whose kid escaped from them, but he did have to admit, this little Naruto was cute. Maybe it wasn't so bad that the child had chosen to take a seat next to him. Is that so? Naruto nodded like it was the most serious thing in the world, as all kids were wont to do. Tucci chuckled, reaching over across the stand and ruffling the child's hair. Little Naruto here likes to help out. He's always giving new customers advice on what to order. Naruto basked in the hair ruffling, the beam on his face brighter than Fire Country's sun. Everything you have is good, but your miso is still the best. And I'm not so little anymore, Tucci-san. I'm nearly 5, the last was said with a bit of a pout. Tucci and Kabuto shared a look of amusement. Kabuto did order miso in the end. He couldn't really see a reason not to, and true to Naruto's word, it was rather delicious. This is good, Kabuto said with a smile as he looked to the smaller boy. You're not bad at choosing these things, Naruto-chan. I think I might come to Ichiraku's more often. You should. The child beamed. The food is really, really good, but Tucci-san is gooder. Kabuto chuckled at the reply, but he thought he understood where Naruto was coming from. There was a strange sense of peace and acceptance that he got at the ramen stand, though he hadn't noticed it before because he was so focused on his thoughts. It was almost like being back home in the library, where he knew that nobody would disturb him. They chatted for a little while longer. Tucci had long since gone to help other customers, but Kabuto didn't mind. Talking with the 4-year-old was fun. He was very amusing, and sometimes he had interesting viewpoints. It was a shinobi village though, so soon their conversation hit a dangerous patch. Naruto's eyes widened at Kabuto's humorous reiteration about what one of his teachers had done during his graduation exam. The eye widening hadn't, however, been because of what Kabuto thought it would be. While you're a ninja, Kabuto's smile tightened, the disastrous meeting with his teammates still fresh in his mind, only since a few days ago. I'm afraid I can't tell you any exciting stories yet. The 4-year-old, surprisingly, seemed to pick up on his unease, because in the next moment, he was frowning. Kabuto-san, don't you want to be a ninja? Kabuto let out a breath. Now wasn't that a loaded question? Being a shinobi wasn't nearly as glamorous as everybody thought it was. He'd worked under Genrei long enough to know that. Helping out his father at the hospital, Kabuto had seen the freshly minted shinobi and the veterans alike being carried home in stretchers, missing parts of their bodies or sometimes worse, parts of their minds. He'd nearly given up on the prospect of becoming a shinobi then, if it weren't for the fact that he wanted to prove himself different from his previous village. As it was, he felt the need to serve Konoha wholeheartedly. To show his father that he hadn't been wrong in saving Kabuto. It's not about want, Kabuto said carefully. I didn't choose this profession to gain happiness. If he wanted happiness, he might have chosen to open a flower shop similar to the one the Yamanakas owned. He did love tending to plants. They never judged him, and they gave him back the same amount of love that he put into them. But treating a flower shop would never give his father back the honor that he lost the day he decided to adopt Kabuto. Flowers were at best mementos to the deceased, and Genrei's legacy would forever be preventing death and the need for flowers. The look on Naruto's face was nearly heartbroken. But if you're ninja, everyone will love you. Don't you think you'll be happy being loved? Kabuto chuckled bitterly. I don't think it works like that. Naruto only shook his head in response. Nah. It will so work like that. Everyone will see that you're trying super hard, and then they'll be touched, and then they'll love you. I'm not saying that it'll be easy, but it'll happen, believe it. Kabuto looked at the little blonde child and his innocent cherub face. If you still believe that in 8 years when you're a genin, then I might start listening to you. That thought brought home exactly how young Naruto was. I can't believe I'm arguing with a 4-year-old, Kabuto muttered. I'm almost 5. Naruto protested, holding up 5 chubby fingers as if that somehow supported his point. Right, Kabuto said as if he were only humoring the other boy, but he did have to admit that it certainly didn't feel like he was arguing with a 4-year-old. Naruto probably had more intelligence than both of his teammates combined. Oh yes, he was feeling vicious. That somehow got them off the topic of shinobi, and onto areas of conversation Kabuto had no idea even existed. Before he knew it, his noodles were finished, and the cup had long since grown cold. They were in the middle of an interesting variation of I Spy when Naruto suddenly cut himself off and puffed out his cheeks. He looked for a moment as if he were arguing with himself, and then his face fell dramatically. What's the matter? Oh, Naruto said morosely, I need to get going. Time passed really quick today, didn't it? The matron at the orphanage is putting everyone to sleep soon, and I have to be back before then or else I might wake people up and then she'll be mad. Kabuto blinked at the confusing order of events and Naruto's logic. He sighed. He supposed that no matter how intelligent Naruto was, he was still a child. Your matron is just worried about you, Kabuto assured with the faintest hint of a smile. Trust me, I know. My father is like that too. He never wants me to stay out too late because he's afraid that I'll get kidnapped or something. Naruto just gave him a long, sad look. Daddies are the bestest, aren't they? Naruto asked quietly, before hopping off his stool and giving Kabuto a wave of goodbye. Come here again. Kabuto watched the blonde leave carefully, and couldn't help but come to a startling revelation. The eyes that followed Naruto. They were the same as the ones that followed him, cleaning for dummies. And 4 months, 7th District Konoha. Sunshine spilled through the tall, wide sheets of glass, bathing the room in glorious light. Dark curtains fluttered at each side of the ornate windows, ready to be pulled closed and plunge the room into darkness. The furniture, though not expensive, looked comfortable enough, and littered the room in a pleasant and airy manner. Off to the sides were multiple doors connecting to other places of the floor, and from the arrangement of the whole building, and one could guess that they had about 4 rooms available to them. Normally such an area would have looked gorgeous, but in light of the gray clothing which should have been white hanging from the edges of the furnishings and the upturned ramen cups littered just about everywhere, the sunlight only served to accentuate how sloppy the place looked. Minato couldn't help but wince as Naruto stepped past the doorway to the living room and yelled a brilliant, "Tadaima!" The words echoed in the empty apartment, but Naruto didn't seem to care as he took off his shoes, humming a tune he'd heard on the streets. Naruto, Minato supposed, had his own way of dealing with their new living arrangements. A month ago they'd been contacted by the Hokage, and had been offered a private place to live. Naruto wasn't kicked out of the orphanage per se, but the bias had gotten so bad that even his little angel couldn't handle it anymore. Or rather, it wasn't that the prejudice got any worse, it was just that Naruto was getting better and better at detecting it. That, combined with the head of the orphanage's complaints, and Naruto's age, allowed for the 5-year-old to move into his own space. The door swung shut behind them, enclosing the two in a place that was now solely their own. The ANBU guard was situated outside, ready in case something drastic happened, but otherwise not privy to any of their privacy. To be honest, Minato had mixed feelings about this place. On one hand, it was a much more spacious room for Naruto to play around in, but on the other hand, he wasn't too fond of the reasons why Naruto got an apartment all to himself. It was just awfully lonely, especially for one little boy. What else are we doing today? Naruto chirped as he trailed to one of the small couches. They just spent the past 3 hours in the marketplace playing a new game Minato had invented 3 weeks ago. Minato's lips quirked, although not all of his humor was good. You know what, Naruto? What do you think about doing some cleaning? It had been only a month since they'd moved in, and the immaculate space that the Sandame had initially left for them had turned into a completely whirlwind jutsu. Minato barely held back a sigh. The Hokage had done his best in getting Naruto a good place to live, but the fact of the matter was that Naruto was only a 5-year-old. Even with Minato here to tell Naruto what to do, it'd be hard for a mere child to cook, clean, and eat every day. Heck, even Minato had hardly been able to manage it. Minato hadn't really taken note of the increasing mess, because Naruto didn't spend a lot of time in the apartment anyway, but when he tripped over a pile of dirty clothing that went up to his knees, Minato decided that enough was enough. Unfortunately, Naruto didn't see it that way. No! The young blonde huffed, crossing his arms. After all, nobody liked cleaning. Minato sighed, and resigned himself to thinking about a way to make the idea of cleaning into something positive. It was almost funny in its way. The yellow flash of Konoha, hailed as a genius in his generation, had to use the same vein of thinking that had created the Hiraishin to get a 5-year-old to do chores. How about this? Minato asked after mulling it over for a while. I'll teach you something neat to get the job done. Naruto brightened immediately, and Minato knew he had him. With a laugh, Minato sent an image of the tree walking exercise to Naruto's mind. Naruto gasped, a hand jumping to his mouth in awe. He squeezed his eyes shut, and then leapt into the air and clicked his heels together as he pumped his fists into the air. Minato laughed. He had no idea where Naruto had gotten the idea that the posture was cool, but it was certainly adorable. You're the bestest, daddy, Naruto gushed when he settled down a bit. I'll clean. First things first, Minato said lightly. Do you know what it would be used for? Naruto's face scrunched up in thought, and after a moment, he nodded. Fire Country has tons of trees, so if shinobi could walk on trees, it'd help them with mobility. I'd also wager that part of tree walking allows them to learn how to be silent amongst leaves, and that'd give them a huge advantage in hiding. Very good, Naruto, Minato said proudly. He was always impressed by how much his son managed to pull from one hint. But this isn't limited only to trees here. He explained to Naruto the intricacies of tree walking, and how it could be applied to other surfaces too, like their wall. He also gave a detailed lesson of how one went about mastering the technique, and Naruto listened very intently. So, what we're going to do, Minato finished, is learn to tree walk and clean your room at the same time. Every time you fail and fall back down, you're required to pick up one piece of trash or clothing. Fair? Naruto nodded. Fair, alright. You may use the feather duster to mark your progress. Okay. Plodding along, Naruto found the aforementioned tool and took a breath, and then he ran towards the wall. He actually got up 5 steps from sheer velocity alone before gravity had its way. With a yelp, Naruto fell back towards the ground, but not before he had forced the patch wall to crumple slightly with the chakra he had exerted through his soles. He twisted himself in the air to land on his palms, and with a simple bend of the elbows, flipped himself over to a standing position again. Minato winced. Although he was only 5, Naruto had inherited the Uzumaki reserves, and added to that, he was slowly but surely absorbing the Kyuubi's chakra. Although Naruto wouldn't be doing any higher ranked jutsus anytime soon, he did have considerably more chakra than any other child his age. Naruto stared sadly at the little patch that signified how high he'd been able to climb before spinning on his heel and plucking the nearest piece of trash, just like he promised. Oh muck it, if you break the walls, Minato joked, you'll have to fix that up too. Naruto just stuck out his tongue at the nearest reflection, and Minato laughed. The small blonde, however, took his father's words to heart. He was more careful with how much chakra he used, and Minato was proud to say that the wall didn't get dented again. As Naruto worked, putting away a piece of garbage with every failure, Minato allowed his mind to wander. He honestly wasn't a big proponent for a small child living by himself, but he supposed that if they were at the orphanage, they wouldn't be able to do something like this. Perhaps if there were 1 or 2 matrons who cared for his child at the orphanage, Minato would have convinced Naruto to stay, but it seemed that ever since the death of the little lady named Choshi Kimiko, the nurses had become ever increasingly paranoid around the blonde child. It wasn't quite that they believed that being in close proximity to the Jinchuriki had done Kimiko in, but it seemed that they decided to stay far away just in case. Of course, Minato would never trade Kimiko's attention to his baby for the world, not even the fondness of the few of the other nurses back at the orphanage. Despite her frail body, she had cared for him, and there wasn't a day back then that Minato didn't wish that he could somehow repay her for what she'd done. Everyone was redeemable, but from the start Kimiko had not judged Naruto based on his burden, and that to Minato was hundreds times better than the care that the nurses might have provided in the future if that did not happen. It was all has-beens anyhow. It was unlikely that Kimiko's death actually had much to do with how the nurses viewed Naruto. Like everything else, it was likely only another excuse to stay away from the Jinchuriki. When he'd found that Kimiko had passed quietly in his sleep, Minato had been sad for her. But she'd lived a full life and was more than ready to meet the Shinigami. Naruto had been far too young to remember her, and Minato didn't know if he should tell the tale of the kindly old woman to his son or not. On one hand, it'd show Naruto that not everyone cared about whatever it was that set Naruto apart. On the other hand, it seemed asinine to bring up the forgotten character of someone who'd been dead for over 3 years. That thought brought a stirring of discomfort, and Minato hurriedly pushed it away in favor of bringing his attention back to his son. The progress he saw shocked him. Alright, that's enough. There was a momentary pause before Minato's request got through to Naruto. Naruto fell off his place on the wall again, his concentration